Guys, welcome. We're gonna do a Salmon Run weapon tier list. And I've not done this before because I feel like all of these are just opinion based, right? So they don't mean everything in the grand scheme of things, right? They kind of mean nothing if you think about it because it's just an opinion. So I've kind of stayed away from this because I don't actually feel like this is helpful or provides any advice or guidance for how to play the game, but I've had a few requests to do this, and now that I feel like we're not going to get any new weapons now, I feel like now's probably the best time to do it. So if we do get any more weapons after this, then I'll hate myself and I might just put a comment under the video. So I did a stream a few months ago, and it was before a few of these weapons came out. It was certainly before the Welsh string came out, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and I was going to put the VOD up on YouTube, but a couple of sort of issues made me not do it. The main issue is that I swore too much in the VOD, and I swear too much when I stream, and if you've never watched me stream, then it might be a bit of a shock, but I think YouTube would not look kindly on that video. I could not bleep enough swear words out.
F streamer! Let me get a picture of my face and put it in F.
So the second obviously is not all weapons that are featured here today were featured back then, so there's also that. And the last reason is I don't often feel like Twitch VODs translate to YouTube very well. There's no chat on screen, so it just looks like I'm barking at myself. It was quite a heated stream, it's quite funny, but you need to see the responses, and you know, it's part of the atmosphere and the personalities of all the people involved, and this is just me talking to myself, so it's a bit different. So that's why I've not uploaded it. I appreciate for everyone that swung by. It was a hell of a fun stream.
This is a democracy. Wait, that just reminded me of that video of that Australian man being escorted. This is democracy manifest.
And as you can see on my tier list, I do not have a D or an E rating. You might not agree with this, but I think there's no point having a D or an E rating for Salmon Run weapons. And my belief is that if a weapon is bad and is unsavably bad, as in it's so awful that it has nothing good about it and is outclassed by every other weapon in its class, then it belongs in F, okay? But if a weapon does have something good about it and is okay, then it's a C, right? It might still be outclassed, but it's not terrible. Then it's a C. I don't think you could say this weapon is awful, but it's not as awful as F, it's an E. To me, that's just nitpicking. You're barely differentiating between much there. Obviously, you can see X tier. X tier means a weapon can do absolutely everything with basically no negatives associated with it, and so forth. So final thing before we start is when I talk about weapon classes, so for example the blaster class, I will not be including the Grizz blaster in that comparison, right? So when I say this is the weakest in the blaster class, that's not inclusive as the Grizz blaster. I will be putting the Grizz weapons in this tier list, but they will come later at the end and separately, because I feel like you can't compare them to their respective weapons in their classes. So if I say, oh, this charger is weak, I'm not including the Grizz charger in that. We're going to start with the shooters, because I feel like a lot of Salmon Run can be measured by how well you can do everything, or you can protect yourself with little punishment. And shooters have a lot of freedom to do whatever they want, and they have much more freedom than the majority, than if not all other weapon classes. So I feel like to measure how good a weapon is, you have to measure it by a shooter would be able to perform certain actions without being punished for it. So something like the 52 gal, I believe, is a solid all-round weapon. But now that I'm looking at my tier chart, I'm like, where do I put it? Do I put it in S or do I put it in A? And I'm thinking I put it in S because it does 52 damage, which is one of the nicest shooters. It's one of the most highest power shooters. But it's also got really good ink tank. It's got really good mobility. It's got really good ink efficiency. The only downside to really the 52 is its RNG, is sometimes you miss shots when you shouldn't, right? That's the problem with the gal range. But other than that, I think it's a solid weapon, and it can protect itself. It can demolish lessers. It has no problem with any bosses. It's such a solid all-rounder. In my opinion, I'm going to stress that this is my opinion, it's the most solid all-rounder of all shooters, in my opinion. So if I had to pick a bog standard shooter to put in any comp, 9 times out of 10, I'd put a 52. Because I feel like it does everything. So for me, it goes in S tier. The 96 gal. So I don't know if I've ever said this, but the 96 gal is my favourite weapon in Salmon Run. It's my absolute favourite. Every time it's in the rota, I'm very happy. I feel like it's the best weapon. I don't feel like it's got any downsides to it. I know you're going to tell me that it misses shots sometimes, but I don't even notice that as an issue because objects in Salmon Run are so big. It's not in PvP, whereas if you miss a shot against another player, that's life and death. You might not take the kill there. But in Salmon Run, it's a cohawk. So you miss your shot, it just goes to the side of the cohawk. Yeah, you're not going to miss much. Sometimes you'll miss a fish stick. Sometimes you'll miss a steelhead. But I feel like they're very few and far between that it doesn't affect how good the 96 gal is. It's a bit slow, but it makes up for that with its damage. It does 85 damage per shot. It is the strongest shooter, bar none, okay? So the only thing that is comparable to it is the H3, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But in terms of single shot weapons, the 96 gal does 85 damage. That is insane. That means it can protect itself. It can slay all bosses, high HP, low HP bosses. It is a bit of a chunky, sort of slow weapon in that sometimes you'll find yourself getting stuck in ink. But if you play to the weapon's strengths and understand its weaknesses, you will find that you won't have a problem with that. It's a shooter. It's not hard to play a shooter. So for me, people might disagree with this, but it goes in X tier because I think it can do everything. You might suffer with your ink and your RNG, but I feel like that's a skill issue in a lot of the sense. The maximum potential of this weapon is that it can do absolutely everything. And the range on it is insane given its damage, right? If you compare a weapon that's got longer range for a shooter like a Nova or a Jet Squelcher, they do not have the power that the 96 gal have. So if you need a shooter that is mid to long range, 96 is undoubtedly 99% of the time the best choice. So for me, all shooters get measured by the 96 gal. Are they as good as the 96 gal? No, then they're not good. Aerospray. Aerospray is an interesting one. So for those that are new to Splatoon 3, that didn't play Splatoon 2, the Aerospray in Splatoon 2 and Salmon Run was god awful. Like, I genuinely think it was one of the worst weapons in the entire game for Salmon Run because it felt like you couldn't kill anything, but it also felt like you weren't contributing to your team either. So if you weren't killing anything, what were you doing? Yeah, it had good paint, but in Splatoon 2, I don't think you really noticed the impact of that. And so the Aerospray just offered nothing. In Splatoon 3, in Salmon Run in this game, it's more evident that you need more than just DPS. You need paint, you need speed, you need ink efficiency, and you need like other things like AoE and stuff like that. So for that reason, I feel like the Aerospray does better in Splatoon 3 because of its fire rate and its paint output, and obviously its ability to just be everywhere all at once. You know, if you jump with it, like, you're not going to have a good time. But other than that, and you know, its damage is 24 per shot, which is rubbish. But other than that, I think it's so helpful in the majority of comps because sometimes all you want as a fourth weapon is a shooter that can paint and support. And Aerospray, I believe, can support so well. The problem is it then becomes outclassed by other weapons in its class that do its job better, such as the N-Zap, the Splash, the Splatter Shot, right? So as much as I appreciate the Aerospray, and I think it's not horrendous, it's not great because in comparison to other shooters, you would rather pick the other shooters, right? So for me, it goes in B tier. Might go lower B eventually, but I don't think it's a bad weapon, but I just think it's outclassed. The L3 Nozzle Nose is an interesting weapon, okay? So it does 40 damage per shot, and in its burst, it can do a maximum of 120, which is great if you think about it. So one shot, and if you hit all three shots on the same target, it's 120. That's pretty powerful for a shooter. right? And given how fast the L3 actually shoots, and you know, if you compare it to the H3, it's quite good. It paints well, it's fast, its ink efficiency is good. Sometimes I feel like the L3 is kind of, because people compare it to the H3, they group them up together, and the H3 is a very tricky, non-intuitive weapon. The L3 works very similar to your Splash, your Aerospray, your T-Tech, your Splatter Shot, right? But it does more damage, and its paint is good, and its accuracy is good, and its ink efficiency is good. So for me, the L3 I feel like is often overlooked as a solid all-round jack-of-all-trades part of your team. I would put it in A tier because I don't feel like it has any problem whatsoever with anything. Maybe I'll put it in S tier by the end of it then. The only thing I think it does come, you know, the issue that does come down to it is that it's not a press and hold, it's a semi-automatic, right? And, you know, that does hold things back in a fast-paced game, especially at HLM, and it's not as easy, it's not as intuitive as other shooters, right? Like I said, just hold forward and press ZR, so you have to think about it a bit. But other than that, I think it's solid. I think it's really, really solid, so I think it will go high A tier by the end of this. Let's talk about my favourite weapon in the game. I'm not joking. In PvP, I have 5-starred the Jet Squelcher. I played it all the time in Splatoon 2. It is genuinely my favourite weapon in the game, and it's really fun for me to play with. In Salmon Run, however, I appreciate that his damage is kind of weak, but I don't know, again, for those who joined us in Splatoon 3 and didn't play Splatoon 2, his damage got buffed for Splatoon 3. In PvP, the Jet Squelcher does 32 damage. In Splatoon 2, Salmon Run, it did 32 damage. For Salmon Run the next wave in Splatoon 3, it does 40 damage. And my god, it's like night and day, the difference. It went from being, again, one of the worst weapons in Salmon Run to being solid. And when you think about its range, the positions you can take with it, the safety that you can achieve with it, because it's got such little damage, you need to be further back, but you can abuse that range. It's one of the longest range weapons in the game, and the fact that it's a shooter and can shoot that far, it's got shooter privileges, so you don't suffer the way other long range weapons suffer. Its fire rate isn't bad, its ink efficiency is great, it paints really well. Again, the only thing that holds it back is its damage output, but then if its damage output was higher, it would be too broken. But I appreciate that there are better weapons. 9 times out of 10, I'd rather have a 96 scale, personally. Where do I put it? I might put it in B tier, because I do think it's outclassed, and I do think, you know, if you get overwhelmed with it, it's really tricky. It takes 10 shots to kill a Cohawk. It's not good. It's not a good weapon. Maybe I'll end up moving it down to C tier, but I just want people to know it's my favourite weapon in the game. That's how harsh I'm being, by the way. So, you know, appreciate that. So, the H3, the H3 nozzle nose is a very interesting weapon. I've done a video on this, a weapon guide, because I think a lot of people struggle with this weapon because it's slow and because it fires in a burst of 3. And people don't want it for those reasons. Why would you want a H3 that is a semi-automatic and kind of clunky when you can have a 96 gal? The thing is, the more I've played with the H3, the more I've come to really appreciate it. So it does 70 per shot, and then 210 if you hit all 3 shots. The only weapon that is more powerful than that as a shooter is the 96 gal. So if you think about it from just pure sort of in its class, other weapons that can compare damage wise, certainly the 96 that beats it. But the reason why you would rather have the 96 than the H3 is much slower. Its fire rate is slower. It gets caught off guard. It can't protect itself in swarms, you know, particularly against swarms of small fry. It can be really tricky. It can 2-cycle a steelhead, but again, that might be tricky to hit given that you have to you know? So I appreciate that it's outclassed. Even though I have a lot of fun with it and its damage is good, it is outclassed. I would still put it, maybe I'll put it in high B. I was thinking maybe I'll put it in low A, but maybe I'll change my mind about that. But I think its weaknesses, which is its poor ink efficiency, slow movement, and, you know, just generally slow fire rate, holds it back quite a lot. So, and you know, I think if I have to think about the shooters right now, that looks about how I would That looks about how I would pick them. I think you get more use out of a Jet Squelcher than a H3 99% of the time, personally. Jet Squelcher can one cycle a Steel Head as well, so, you know, for that reason alone, I think it deserves to be in front of the H3. NZAP. NZAP's in a funny position. NZAP is the only weapon ever in Salmon Run, I think. I might be wrong on this, but the NZAP got buffed in PvP and it didn't get buffed in Salmon Run. And then eventually they buffed it in Salmon Run. So it does 30 damage now, whereas before for the longest time it did 28. NZAP is NZAP. Like, there is nothing more standard than the next 3 weapons that I'm about to talk about, because they all carry the same role in a comp, which is a jack of all trades, supportive, a slayer. They can do everything and they can fill a role wherever you need it, and they're so easy to use, and they help with paint as well. You know, paint is really, really important in Salmon Run, and I think a lot of people just don't think about that because, you know, it's not like an objective. You don't get points for it, you don't get the card, you don't see the scorecard at the end of Salmon Run that tells you how much turf you painted. By the way, I would love that to be a thing. And weapons like NZAP, Splash and Splatshot are weapons that are integral to doing that in a comp. The best thing about all 3 of them is that they can all take whatever role you want as well. So if you have got a weapon that has got a lot of DPS, then your shooter here doesn't need to be the DPS. It can be the supportive slayer. If you've got supportive slayer, it can be a paint, it can be a paint bot, that's what I was going to say. Like, it can do everything, all 3 of these weapons. So the difference between all 3 of these weapons comes down to RNG of the weapon and damage. The NZAP is pretty accurate, you don't really tend to have any issues with it unless you jump, and its damage is 30. The Splashomatic, it does 28 damage, so it does slightly less than the NZAP, but it has perfect accuracy when you jump. And then we have the Splatshot, which has 36 damage. So this is the one with the most damage, but it also has a slightly slower fire rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it does. And it's not as ink efficient as the other 2. I mean, I feel like you're like clutching at straws there to say that, because you don't notice it that much. So if you want to compare, one has better damage, one has better accuracy, and one has better like ink efficiency. That's what you would want. Personally, me, the T-Tech is a solid S. I keep calling it the T-Tech, by the way. It's imprinted in my brain from Splatoon 2. Sorry, it's a Splatshot. That, to me, is an all-rounder, does absolutely everything, has no downsides. I love this weapon, and I would pick it for a lot of comps if I wanted a shooter. This and the 52, there's only very minimal differences, in my opinion, between them, but there'd be slight reasons why sometimes I would want a Splatshot over a 52 and vice versa. To me, functionally the same, okay? The way I use them and the way I view them. The Splash, I would put in high A, because as much as I think its lack of RNG is good, its slightly lower damage does sort of bring it down a little bit. I do think I'd rather have an L3 actually as well instead of the Splash, because again those two do very similar roles, and I think I'd rather have the L3, just slightly more for damage. The NZAP, I think I'll put with the Splash. I don't particularly have any preference over these two. I just know I would prefer the L3 over these two, I think. I think that makes sense. Like, if I haven't explained that very well, I'm sorry, but essentially the Splash, the NZAP and the Splatshot, they all perform the same duty, the same role, but I think the Splattershot outperforms them both, given it's got slightly better damage, and I think it's got more ability to switch roles because of that damage. It's got more ability to take up a position of a Slayer compared to these two. So if you don't have a Slayer, your T-Tech can fill in very, very easily, whereas these two you might struggle against some of the higher HP bosses. That's it. That's my view on it. Let's crack on. Splatshot Junior. Well, this is an interesting weapon. Again, it was one of those weapons that kind of felt a bit pants in Splatoon 2. But now it feels better in Splatoon 3 because paint, mobility and things like that are really important in Salmon Run now, and you know, being able to shit out bombs all the time. It's fantastic. Its damage is the same as the Splashomatic. It's 28, you know, so you haven't got good damage. It's got poor RNG when you jump, so you can one cycle a Steelhead with a Junior. It is possible, but as soon as you jump, you will not one cycle it. You tend to struggle quite a bit with high HP and sort of if you're getting overwhelmed. But the good thing about the Junior is if you keep your space and if you understand that while you don't have the best damage, you do have the best ink tank in the entire game and a decent fire rate as well, then you can work your way through situations that a weapon like the Splash or the NZAP won't be able to. I think I would prefer a Junior over these two, just because you're faster as well. Your ink efficiency is so good. I swear, if you run out of ink with the Junior, then that's a skill issue, okay? Like, you should never run out of ink with the Junior. You need to reevaluate the way you're playing it. Again, I feel like it feels like a slightly similar role to the other shooters in this class as well. And it just depends on what you prefer. Do you put, like with the NZAP, do you prefer accuracy? Or with the Junior and Splash, do you prefer a bit more paint and a bit more mobility? With the L3, do you prefer a bit more power? So I feel like where these go in the same tier doesn't really matter, because they all kind of, at the end of the day, they all kind of fill the same role in a comp in Salmon Run. Splatshot Pro, interesting weapon. I really like it, but I do think it's terribly outclassed by other shooters in its class. The reason I say that is because its ink efficiency holds it back. It's got really good damage and it's got really good range, and sometimes I feel like those things are overlooked with the Splatshot Pro. It does 45 per shot, and I think that's really important for people to remember. But its ink efficiency is so poor sometimes that if you throw a bomb, it's GG's, you're dead. And I don't understand why a shooter is penalised that much. So if you have to think about weapons that you would rather have, I would always rather have a 96 gal instead of a pro. I would always rather have a 52. If you're thinking about mid-range, I would always rather have a Jet Squelcher because the ink efficiency is better. Its damage is only 5 less than the Splatshot Pro. So, and then the H3, I would put the Pro with the H3 because I feel like they're both the same. And the only reason I would put the Pro ahead of it is because it's slightly easier to use, and that it's just you hold fire. But I think more or less they have the same range and they have the same DPS totals, I think. I might be wrong on that, but I'm sure they're more or less the same. But again, they're shooters, so even if they're bad, they're still good. Wait till you see other bad weapons. Like, when they're bad, they really suffer, but shooters get so much privilege that they can be bad and still be B rank, like these shooters. Nova, I think, is the first one that's going to go into C rank, and I tell you why. What is the point of having a Nova on your team? So I want you to think about why you would pick a Nova instead of any other shooter. And for me, I can't think of one single reason. You tell me you want it to paint, well, I'd rather have a Junior, a Splash, an NZAP, a 52, or a Splatshot, because its ink efficiency is not as good as you think it is. The Nova, for a weapon that's supposed to be paint spam, does not paint that well. And then you think, well, I want a shooter with sort of mid-range. Why would you not have a Jet Squelcher? Again, a 96, even an L3 or a Pro. The range is there in other shooters. I also think, what does the Nova do that any of these other weapons can't do better? But the reason it doesn't go in F tier is because it's a shooter and it's not the worst weapon in the world. It just sucks in comparison to the rest of its class. I would rather pick every single one of these before it. So that's the reason. Just so people know, it does 30 damage. So, you know, there are shooters that have better damage than it or exactly the same damage as it. So it's nothing special about it. I don't like playing with it because I don't feel like it does anything well at all. Everything it does is average and boring. It's not fun to play with. Splashomatic. I've been thinking about this and I want to put it in X tier because I feel like I can do anything with this weapon. I genuinely feel like when I have this weapon, I'm invincible. You know the invincibility music from Sonic when he's just running and he's got sparkles around him? That's how I feel every time I get given the sploosh in Salmon Run. And not many other weapons make me feel like that. The 96 Scout does, So I feel like if I feel like I'm invincible, then it should be an X rank. There's an ice cream van outside, and I don't know if it's picking it up on the mic. I'm trying to talk about Salmon Run here. Mate, it's not even that sunny today. It's fucking raining. The Brits are so desperate for a summer. It's unbelievable. Anyway, where was I? Sploosh-o-matic, right? So it does 45 damage, okay? Which is great. It's a lot more than most other shooters. So you have that. Its fire rate is insane. It just fires so quickly. The only downside that it has is its range. I understand when people go, how can that be an X rank when its range is that poor? My friends, you just need to jump with it. I'm not even joking. You just need to jump with it and it's fine. You don't notice the lack of range. I get in PvP, you'd notice the lack of range. Salmon Run, no, you don't notice it. Use ledges, use walls, jump a bit more, and you're fine. And it does everything. It does absolutely everything all the other shooters in this list does. I think I should put it in front of that 96 scale actually. Because I think it fits into more comps than the 96 scale does. So it does absolutely everything. You have no problems whatsoever with the sploosh. If you can't get over its short range, then you need to figure out a way to do that, quite frankly, because I think it's one of those things that it's a bit of a skill issue. It does so much damage. It shreds through absolutely everything, but it's also got such good mobility, such good ink efficiency. So all the weapons that shred through things like the 96 scale, let's compare it, right? Shreds for everything, but its ink efficiency isn't so good. If you throw a bomb, you gotta wait a bit. Sploosh, not a problem. Shreds for everything, can throw bombs like it's an aero spray. So X tier, easily. What does it suffer against? Nothing. It can reach steel heads and one cycle them. It can deal with fish sticks. Like, you wouldn't have the sploosh go for those things, but if the sploosh has to go for those things, it can do it, no problem. So that's the way I view things. Like, it can do absolutely everything with very, very minimal negatives associated with it. So Squeezer. Squeezer is my least favourite shooter out of all of them. And it's a weapon that I tend to avoid playing with as much as possible. The only reason that is A, it's a bit of a skill issue on my part, but B, because I have some problems with the tendons and the joints in my hand. So anything that requires repeated mashing, I can't do, okay? I can't do for a long time anyway. So there's that. The fact that it has this weird niche where if you hold it down, it does 34 per shot, and if you tap shot, it does 50 and you get longer range. It's kind of a cool niche, I'm not gonna lie. It's nice that you have that variability with it, but again, if you compare the Squeezer to other weapons in its class, with its short range fire versus its long range fire, what does it do that other weapons can't do? The only thing that I would say that makes it anywhere outside of C rank is the fact that it does 50 damage and that it's a shooter. The 50 damage I feel like is great. The extra work that has recently happened on Smokeyard with the Squeezer, I played the Squeezer for a little bit and I thought, God, it's really good for Mothership. Just one shot crates, that's fantastic. But outside of that, I'm like, what do I think is good about Squeezer? Not much. But I will concede that it is a bit of a skill issue on my part, and if you are able to utilise its tap shots with the 50 damage, you can get a lot of value out of it, and it has potential to be a solid shooter in a team. But I still think other shooters outperform it in terms of fire rate, in terms of overall damage and paint. The Squeezer can't paint that well either. It goes into the same category that I would put the Pro H3 in, because it's a mid-range shooter with slightly better damage than your other shooters with slower fire rate. Again, I think it's a personal preference whether you would rather the Squeezer, the H3 and the Splatshot Pro. They kind of all fill the same role, and it depends on what you prefer. Like, do you prefer a shooter? Do you prefer the burst damage of the H3? Do you prefer the fact that you can change short range and long range with the Squeezer? I don't think one makes them better than the other. I just think it's personal preference. But again, I think they all fill the same role. Alright, that's all the shooters. So now we move on to the blasters, and we're going to start with a clash. it's objectively the weakest blaster in terms of overall damage in its entire class, alright? Does 85 per shot and its indirects do 50. So indirects are much more important on blasters than any other weapon because it's actually part of the way you utilise the weapon. So its AoE, its area of effect or area of explosion, is very important to the weapon overall. And the Clash Blaster has the weakest damage of directs and the weakest damage of indirects. So you're kind of like, well, that's not good. But the thing about the Clash Blaster is that it has the best fire rate pretty much of all the blasters, and it's super fast, and it can really help with clusters of enemies. It can really help with damaging a bit of everything all at once and from weird angles and from underneath or next to it. I don't think it's a bad weapon, but I appreciate that you would rather have other blasters, and B, its paint is poor. So all blasters don't have, great paint or ink efficiency, and their ability to paint is not their strong point at all. It's not what you look for in a blaster. But sometimes I feel like the Clash is worse than every other blaster for painting. And I felt like if it got a slight paint buff, where it paint its own feet a bit more regularly, it would make a world of difference to the Clash Blaster. But until then, I can't argue in good faith that it's good, especially when we're going to get through the rest of these blasters. I really enjoy playing with it because I feel like it has a lot of utility as a supportive role, but I also understand that given its weak damage and its poor paint, that you would rather have other weapons, and I don't feel like it always works with certain comps. I feel like it's comp dependent on if you're able to get the most out of it. I don't mind playing it. It's very easy to use, it's very fun to use, and I find like you can do a lot of weird and wonderful things with it. So I think I'm going to put it in B rank for now. I'll put it here. I might change my opinion with the Clash, because in comparison to other weapons, I feel like it's okay. It's not terrible. It's just outclassed, I think. That's the issue. It's like, why would you pick a Clash Blaster when the Lunar Blaster exists? We'll get there. So, the regular blaster. Regular blaster is okay. It's solid. Does 200 damage. Its indirects do between 100 and 140. It's got a bit of RNG to it when you jump. Its ink efficiency, again, is not great. Feels a bit slow. The problem is all blasters are like this, so you kind of accept their limitations. But why would you pick the blaster over the range blaster or the S-Blast? That's the thing that's in my mind right now, because I wouldn't pick the blaster over either of those two. The other two are so much better. So if you're looking for a solid all-round blaster that doesn't have too many niches like the Rapids or the Lunars or the Clashes, you just want a blaster, why would you pick the vanilla blaster over the range or the S-Blast? For that reason, it goes in B tier. The range blaster is so much better. And I'm going to explain to you why the range blaster is better, because the clue's in the name. It's got a bit more range, but it's also got a bigger area of effect. It also does more damage, 250. Its indirects are also more consistent. They're straight up 150 compared to the regular blasters, maybe 100, maybe 140. The only downside with the range is a bit slower, right? That's the trade-off compared to the blaster. The regular blaster is faster. But I feel like for all those reasons, it's still better than the blaster. And I feel like it can do a lot more than a regular blaster does. So the measure of a good weapon, in my opinion, is if it can one-cycle a stillhead and if it can deal with cohocks very easily. The blaster can one-cycle a stillhead and deal with cohocks easily, but so can the range blaster. The range blaster can deal better with indirects, can deal better for splash damage. And so for that reason, outclassed by the range blaster. Whether I put it into S tier or not is, I think, debatable, and I think it really depends on where I put the S-Blast, to be honest. The range blaster is my favourite blaster in the game because I find it really fun and fulfilling to play with. But I appreciate that I don't think it can protect itself in a lot of situations, especially up close. And I think it does have the ability to suffer in certain comps. It doesn't fit into a lot of comps very easily. But if you think about its ability to put out damage, 250 per shot, and this AoE spread, I think is really, really fun to play with, and something that I feel like a lot of people, if you struggle with the range blaster, you should work on it, because I think you can get a lot of value out of it. I don't know, that's coming from someone that couldn't play any fucking blaster for 3 years in this game, and now I think they're the best weapon class. So eventually it will happen to you. So I'm going to talk about the Rapid Blasters together, the Rapid Blaster and the Rapid Blaster Pro. I've done a video on this, and I've done a video on them both together because functionally, the way you use them in Salmon Run is near enough identical, okay? The difference is the Rapid Blaster does 140 damage with its indirects doing 60. The Rapid Pro does 150 with its indirects doing 75. The Rapid Pro also has longer range. It has a slight trade-off in that its fire rate is slightly slower and its ink usage is slightly higher. But I don't even notice that in Salmon Run. I don't think it's even worth mentioning because I don't feel like it affects you that much. So, for that reason, why would you pick the Rapid over the Rapid Pro? You wouldn't, right? Goes in C tier because I don't think it offers anything of value when the Rapid Pro exists. The Rapid Pro, on the other hand, does have some weaknesses. It is terrible up close with any lessers. You will struggle a lot. At 150 per shot, it's quite weak objectively compared to other blasters. It can two-cycle a steelhead quite comfortably, the Rapid Pro, and it can shoot down fish sticks really easily. It's really good at getting rid of stingers, but you will struggle against other enemies. Stunning scrappers and then killing them will take some time. Killing big shots will take some time. You know, for things that have 500 HP, like the back of scrappers, steel eels, slamming lids, 4 shots, it takes time. You know, it's not a great weapon. It's better than its counterpart, but it's still terribly outclassed by a lot of other weapons. And again, I like the Rapid Pro. It's personally one of my favourite weapons to play with, and now I play it in PvP. But objectively, I understand that it's not great, and there's a lot of other blasters that I'd rather have before it. The Lunar Blaster. I know there's a lot of people that love this weapon, myself included. I think it is objectively overall the best blaster in the game for Salmon Run. And the reason I say that is because I feel like it can deal with everything, and I feel like it has very minimal negatives associated with it, but that doesn't make it bad. That doesn't weigh it down. It doesn't cause many issues. The main negative associated with it is its range, but it also has the largest area of effect of any blaster to counteract that. So it's like, what do you value? Do you value range or do you value AoE? And I feel like if you've got a blaster, sometimes it's AoE, right? So Luna can go up close and personal, which a lot of the other blasters cannot do. I feel like the Luna can protect itself a lot more compared to other blasters. It doesn't feel as slow as the range blaster or the S-Blast. Its damage is not as good as those two. Its damage is 200, so it's obviously weaker in a sort of per shot sense, but I feel like it has so much more going for it that it outweighs the fact that it's slightly weaker and slightly shorter range. Its indirects as well do 100 to 140, so there is some variability with how much your indirects will do. But if you think of Rush, or if you think of Tornado, and you have a Lunar Blaster, and you can just stand there and shoot, you don't have to think about it, you shoot, your indirects pick off everything. And even if you don't, even if you think of HLM, high tide, or the spawning grounds, your Luna will pick off everything. Your Luna can jump and one-shot fish sticks. Your Luna can one-cycle a steelhead. Your Luna can deal with big shots on the other side of the map, not on high tide obviously. So I don't feel like the Luna has that many downsides. I also feel like as well, and I don't know, I don't have the stats to back this up, I also feel like his ink tank isn't as punishing as other blasters. I feel like his ink efficiency is slightly better. And so I feel like you can run around a bit more and throw a few more bombs compared to other blasters, which you kind of don't want to do with blasters because their main weapon is so much better than the majority of the time you want to use bombs. But if you do have Moors on you, if you do need fly fish gone, then I feel like the Luna is a bit better at going to deal with those problems than the other blasters. It's a bit faster. So for that reason, it goes in S tier. I don't think it's X tier worthy because I think like given that it's a blaster, it it doesn't have the same sort of immunities that shooters have, right? It's a bit more punishing. You do have to be a bit careful with how you position yourself with a Luna compared to some of these shooters. But I do feel like, again, it's one of those weapons that fits in with the majority of comps. It's one of those weapons that can deal with almost all threats without issue. And it's one of those weapons that is really, really fun to play as well, personally. I love it. It's behind the range blaster, it's like my favourite weapon to play. The range, I just prefer it because I like my slower, more powerful shots. But if you're someone who likes running into things, sort of head empty, brain cells off, then the Lunar Blaster is really fun. You need to get the hang of it. We're going to talk about a weapon that I don't like, and I'm going to try my best not to let it cloud my decision making. But we're going to talk about the S-Blast. And the reason I don't like it is because I feel like in Salmon Run, it's different shooting styles. It's long range versus it's short range. It's kind of pointless. The only time you want to use long range is against steelheads. The S-Blast does 300 damage per direct shot, which is insane. It's the most powerful blaster, and it can one-shot steelheads. Don't talk about one cycling, it can one-shot them, which is fantastic, which makes it incredible. Its long range has quite decent range as well, meaning that you can shoot steelheads from substantially far away, and as long as you hit that direct, you're good. Its indirects do 150, which is the same as the range blaster, by the way. So it doesn't get a buff for indirects. It's only got like this huge sort of direct 300 damage compared to all other blasters. The short range is really good against lessers and protecting yourself if things get a bit crazy, but you have to jump with it. You're encouraged to jump with this blaster, which is extremely different to all other blasters. For me, I don't like it because I feel like it's slow, and I feel like the range blaster is more fun to play with. It's literally just A, a skill issue, and B, personal preference. But I can appreciate that S-Blast has things that the range blast doesn't have, which is its interchangeable short range fire modes and long range fire modes, and the fact that it does 300 damage. So for that reason, it goes at the bottom of S tier. I don't want it there. Personally, I'd put it in C tier. But I respect it in that I feel like it can deal with everything, and if you've got the S-Blast in the right hands, it performs exceptionally well. I've seen people play with it and they perform really well. I'd rather have a range blaster, quite frankly. Right, let's talk about Brellas. I'm actually going to talk about the undercover Brella first because I think it's the most interesting. So the undercover Brella was unanimously considered the worst weapon in Salmon Run and Splatoon 2. It was so useless, and its shield would actually hinder you rather than help you, especially when you compared it to the Splat Brella. It did nothing. It had nothing of value. It had piss poor damage. I can't remember it off the top of my head. And it was so ineffective at dealing with anything that it was considered the worst weapon in Salmon Run, as far as I'm aware. In Splatoon 3, because we have other objectives, it kind of did alright. It wasn't objectively terrible anymore, but it wasn't great either. It still had the same problems, sort of like ineffective damage, and why would you pick the UCB instead of the Splat Brella, for example? But then something great happened not too long ago. I think earlier this year, 2024, the UCB got buffed. It got 25% damage buff, and it got 25% damage increase to its canopy. So now the undercover Brella does 150 per shot, which means it can one cycle a steelhead now, and its canopy now does 50 damage. So now during rush waves, your canopy destroys chum without you needing to fire your weapon. I swear to God, these two things that changed about it has pushed the undercover Brella from being a bottom tier weapon to almost an A tier, in my opinion, because now it comfortably damages bosses. The 150 damage is so important to that weapon, and it's changed how much it can deal with. The speed at which you can kill bosses has dramatically improved. Things such as steelheads and cohocks. Cohocks are now free shots. It's huge. If you think about salmon runners working against the timer or working against the clock, you want to perform certain tasks very quickly to effectively maximize how many golden eggs you can deposit, right? It's an efficiency thing. The UCB got a huge buff to its efficiency. Personally, like I said, I would put it in A tier. I might put it at the bottom of A tier now, actually, because I think its canopy is so good now. At 50 damage, it puts a lot of damage on things that it's worth flashing your canopy. So the way that you would use the canopy in Splatoon 2 was to avoid using the canopy at all costs because it would send you flying. It was kind of useless. But now you want to use the canopy in Splatoon 3 to help put damage on enemies such as Cohogs when you're attacking them with your main weapon. It does bounce you a little bit and sometimes it will snap, but you know, it's Brella, they all do that. You just kind of have to learn to deal with that, you know, and it can protect you from steelhead bombs. You know, the health of the canopy is fantastic. And for anybody who's watching this video and going, what the hell, I can't believe you put the UCB in A tier, please go and play with it and, you know, understand how bad it was. Is now, you know, it's amazing now. I think it's a really solid weapon, and given that it has decent paint, decent ink efficiency, decent mobility, I feel like it can fit into a lot of teams really easily as well now. I think it's one of the most versatile weapons, and before where you would argue it did nothing, now I think you can slay with it really well, but also take a step back and be a supportive player for your team. So let's talk about the recycled Brella. This is a new weapon for Splatoon 3, and it's kind of like a really weird variant of the Splat Brella / maybe the UCB. It fires off its shields a hell of a lot faster than all the other Brellas, and it also regenerates them a hell of a lot faster. The trade-off though is that it doesn't have as much HP. It does do damage. The canopy does do 100 damage, and I think people don't realise that a single direct shot from a recycled Brella is 210. Okay? 210. That's more than the Splat Brella, which we're going to talk about soon. The problem is, it doesn't paint very well, and its canopy is kind of tricky to use because sometimes you want to flash your canopy and not set it off. The thing with the recycled Brella is that you're encouraged to set the canopy off over and over and over, as ink efficiency is really good for that. So you're kind of like, don't use bombs, use your canopy. It's a weird weapon, but I feel like the people that love it probably love it a lot, and the people that don't like it probably don't like it a lot. I think it's solid, and I think it deserves to go in A tier by the fact that it's got a canopy that can protect itself and it does 210 damage per shot. Its only downside is that it absolutely sucks at painting. Like, it cannot paint anything. If it got a buff to its paint output, it'd be great. I think it's slightly more useful than the UCB. Actually, no, I don't. My reasoning for that is because I think the UCB's canopy is better than the recycled Brella's canopy now. So but again, I think that's personal preference. They both kind of serve the same function in a way. The recycled Brella does a bit more damage, and the canopy, in my opinion, on the undercover Brella is more useful. Different strokes for different folks, right? You know, but I feel like they kind of serve the same purpose. Splat Brella. So Splat Brella was in Splatoon 2 like an A tier, S tier weapon because it kind of did everything, and it's really fun to learn how to use its canopy. It's the bog standard canopy in that you can flash it and pull it back and not send it off. Since the recycled Brella come out though, I've kind of found myself appreciating the recycled Brella a bit more than the Splat Brella because of its damage increase. The Splat Brella does 180 per direct, and its canopy does the same damage at 100. So they kind of have similar things, except the recycled Brella is a bit faster than the Splat Brella, but sometimes you want the Splat Brella because it is a bit slower with its canopy. Again, I don't feel like there's much difference between them, and I feel like it's personal preference. For me, my personal preference is the Splat Brella because you can two-shot Cohogs with the Splat Brella included, and it's really easy to do that just by flashing your Brella. And I've kind of, you know, call me old or call me stuck in my ways, but I've been playing this game since 2017, and so I've gotten used to how the Splat Brella functions and how it works with its canopy. The recycled Brella might take me a few more years. But again, I feel like they more or less serve the same purpose. They more or less do the same thing. I'm gonna put the UCB above the Splat Brella. Seriously guys, I'm a huge UCB fan now. I do like the fact that the Splatbrella deals with high HP bosses really easy, and it's really fun to play with. And the tech of that weapon is very interesting to utilize with the Brella, and being able to, you know, get canopy damage and protect yourself, and, you know, live situations that you wouldn't necessarily think you would live. So, but I think it's personal preference whether you prefer the UCB, the Splatbrella, or the recycled. We're going to talk about one of my favorite weapons in the game. In my top 5 is this weapon. It's the TENTREBRELLA. I don't know where I would place it because it does have some downsides to it, but it's one of my absolute favorites to play with. I just find it so fun and so different. And so again, the TENTREBRELLA was an interesting weapon in Salmon Run and Splatoon 2. It was powerful, and its canopy was, you know, really useful. The way canopies work in Splatoon 3 and Salmon Run now is not quite the same, and in Splatoon 2 it would bounce in the same space but not move position. In Splatoon 3, if it bounces off something, it either veers to the left or to the right. So you don't have that repeated damage that you can inflict on like a Quahog or a Fat Boss over and over again. So for that reason, the TENTREBRELLA is not as useful in certain situations, like against Quahogs and things like that. But in patch 4.0 of Splatoon 3, they increased the damage of the TENTREBRELLA for Salmon Run, but now it does 360 direct. Insane. Powerful weapon. You can one-shot a Steelhead. You can one-shot a Quahog and leave it for your mates to pick up, alright? Quahogs have 400 HP, so if you put 360 on it, your silly little Nova or your silly little Rapid can kill it. And I can't tell you how fantastic that is when you're playing Salmon Run. You won't necessarily have the time to kill Quahogs, but if you get rid of, I can't do maths, 80% of their HP. I think I'm probably wrong. 360. I'm gonna Google that actually. Did I get that right off the top of my head? No, it's 320. So I don't know. I can't do maths. All right. So if you maths is not my strong point. All right, guys. You're not here to listen to me do basic mathematics. Okay. You're here to listen to me rant about weapons. Which, you know, if you are, thank you. I appreciate it. There's a lot more videos. You should like and subscribe and all that shit that YouTube keeps telling me that I should tell you. You might not be subscribed to me, and you might prefer it that way, but if you want to, you should press subscribe. Anyway, you should shoot Quahogs with a TENTREBRELLA because your mates with weaker weapons can pick up the kill, and you should do that with most enemies. So for me, one of the best ways that a TENTREBRELLA is effective is by being supportive, is by being a huge, slow powerhouse of damage. Okay, so you can one-shot Steelheads, fantastic, but you can't one-shot anything else. But if you shoot a Drizzler once, if you shoot a Scrapper once, you are helping your teammates so much. And I don't know many other weapons that fulfill that same kind of niche. And that's before I've even spoken about its bloody canopy. Its canopy is so unbelievably useful. Like, it's honestly, I can't compare it to anything else in the game with how well you can utilize its canopy in Salmon Run, just for dealing with small fry, chum, and even helping damaging Quahogs. Like, if you want to kill Quahogs, you will shoot them once and then flash your canopy and the Quahog's dead, so you don't have to shoot them twice. You can use the technique of flashing your canopy to help protect you, but if you want to save ink, you bring the canopy back in rather than firing it off. The canopy does 150 damage to anything it contacts, okay? So it's more than the other canopies. And I think off the top of my head, it's got 500 HP. I'm just gonna double check that. Hold on, I got it wrong. It's got 700 HP. It's insane. This thing's got so much health. Don't use bombs. If I see you using a bomb with a TENTREBRELLA, you need to come and have a chat with me and I'll tell you how wrong you are to do it. Obviously, with Fly Fishing Moors, I get it, but do not use your bombs with the TENTREBRELLA. If you're using a bomb with a TENTREBRELLA, that's why you don't like the TENTREBRELLA, okay? Don't use bombs. Unless you absolutely have to, because I know someone's going to comment and go, oh, so I just ignore Moors and fly fish then? And I will say, yeah, actually you should. Your teammates should deal with it, but that's a conversation for another time. Or you should use your goddamn specials, right? So, TENTREBRELLA, weaknesses, it's slow. Its ink efficiency is kind of horrendous. If you use the canopy, you can't throw a bomb and vice versa. Its ink refill is very slow. It's a weapon that you really have to understand the pace basing of. You cannot throw yourself into situations and expect to live without understanding how you're going to work it, how you're going to use the canopy to help protect you, or how you're going to escape. Okay, so I appreciate that it has some downsides, even though I love it more than most other weapons in the game. I appreciate that it can be really tricky to use if you do not have support. If you do not have a weapon on your comp that can be paint support for a Tenta, you are going to have a really bad time with the Tenta Brella. I feel like this should be here. Personal preference. It does more damage. Let's talk about charges. Bamboozler. It's a tricky one to rate because it doesn't have a lot that's good about it. But I also am a bamboo believer. I also think the weapon is not as terrible as everybody makes it out to be. And I think it's a bit of a skill issue in some parts. But I appreciate if you compare it to every other weapon in its class, I think it's average, right? I think it's average. The fact that it can't pierce hurts it. The fact that it is the weakest in the entire charger class hurts it. It does 160 for a full charge, doesn't pierce, and its partials do between 60 and 160. But the benefits of the weapon is that it charges so fast that you're constantly doing 160 damage. It's not like a GooTuber that takes 10 years to fucking charge. And yeah, you might pierce, but you don't one-shot anything. So the bamboo in that respect performs better because it's faster and you can get more damage out quickly compared to something that takes longer to charge. I'll talk about the GooTuber in a while, but I prefer the bamboo over the goo, for example, and the vanilla charger because it's faster. And so I can move around a bit more. It's a lightweight weapon, which goes a very long way, and because you can regenerate ink really quickly and move very quickly. And so with the bamboo, you can play really well against static enemies. You know, you can take care of stingers very well, and you can get to stingers very easily. And because it's a charger, it's got range. So you don't necessarily have to be up close to it. You can take positions that allow you to have some safety. The problem with the bamboo, again, is that it doesn't pierce, and that you might struggle against things with high HP like drizzlers and big shots. The answer to that is to shoot back drizzler torpedoes and to use your special and big shots if they're an issue. But you know, we're not talking about strategy, we're talking about weapon potential, and so I feel like the bamboo does suffer. Its paint is appalling too. As much as I don't mind the weapon, I can appreciate that. God, I just wish it painted a bit better. Why doesn't it paint lines? Why is it dots? The way I use it is I use it like a shooter, and I've got a video guide about this weapon as well. Is I tend to use it more in line with a semi-automatic shooter rather than viewing it through the lens of a charger. But saying all that, it's still a fucking charger. So if it is a charger, why is it a bad charger? I'd still rather it over those three weapons. I don't think it's a bad weapon, but when you compare it to other chargers and other shooters, you know, if I'm sitting here saying I view it as a shooter, then I should compare it to other shooters. Doesn't have much going for it. Swiffer, on the other hand, I think it's our next X tier weapon. It's also another top 5 favourite of mine. It does 300 damage per charge. It is the only weapon that is able to charge its shots while in mid-air that doesn't get a penalty for it. So if you jump whilst charging, it's still the same as if you were standing still. It pierces, its ink efficiency is good, its mobility is good. There is no downside to this weapon that I can think of off the top of my head, genuinely. Like I feel like I'm invincible with this weapon. I don't feel like you should suffer with this weapon. It is a charger that is so powerful up close, but also can sort of hang back and be supportive. You can one-shot a steelhead, you can one-cycle a lot of other bosses with 300 per direct, and you can pierce. So while you may not be able to one-shot Cohocks, you can hit about 7 of them in a row with one shot, which helps your teammates with weaker weapons. Things like that go such a long way, and for me, I don't even need, I think Again, I think it's debatable where you would put these, and I think it's preference whether you would rather a Sploosh, a Swiffer, or a 96, but for me, like, there's no downsides to this weapon. It works with most comps as well, because funny enough, the Swiffer also isn't a bad painter as well, so it's not like it's a weapon that struggles if there's no paint on the field, like the Tensorbrella or the S-Blast. Swiffer can paint for itself. There is no downside to this weapon, and my god, if you don't like this weapon, I need you to tell me why. Because it is one of the best weapons in Salmon Run, bar none. E-liter, one of my other favourite weapons in the game. Are you guys noticing a pattern about which weapons I tend to like? Can you imagine what role I play in PvP? So E-liter, it is the most powerful charger per shot. So in terms of single fully charged shot, the E-liter does 600, which is crazy. It can two-shot big shots. It can two-shot things like Moors and flipper floppers. If you wanted to shoot them, you can. The downside is that it takes longer to charge than any other charger. I think it might not be as long as the Goo Tuber, because that weapon's a piece of shit, but the E-liter can pierce, so you can line up 8 Cohocks in a row and kill them all with one shot. You can shoot through a Moors and one shot a Steelhead. You know, you can shoot through the King Salmonids and one shot things with the E-liter. The downside is a heavyweight weapon, so it gets penalties the same way that other heavyweight weapons do, in the sense that it's slower, its ink recovery is not as good, and its ink efficiency is not as good. I think you get 4 shots per ink tank, which is not great. If you throw a bomb, I think you've barely only got enough for 1 afterwards. Other than that, I think it's really self-sufficient. Its tap shots do 50, and its partials can do up to 150, but my god, please don't ever use partials with this weapon. It's one of those weapons that needs to be fully charged to utilize. You'll have to tap shot, don't get me wrong, things like rush and stingers and things like that. You'll have to partial for a stinger pot though, bear in mind that. I think the stinger pots are 60 HP, aren't they? Let me just double check that. Yeah, stinger pots are 60 HP, so you'll have to partially charge to one-shot stinger pots as an E-liter, but I mean, other than that, like, I don't care. Just use your special. If there's 3 stingers, I use my special as an E-liter, or I throw bombs, you know? So I don't think there's many downsides. Obviously, the fact that it's a heavyweight and it's a bit slow is its downside, but I feel like it's extremely self-sufficient, and if you know how to play chargers, you know what you're doing. And for that reason, I'm putting it in S tier, actually. What am I even doing? Why am I lying to myself? I'd rather have an E-liter than those other weapons. I think it's opinion whether you would rather have an E-liter versus a T-Tech or a 52 or a Tenta or an S-Blast, right? Sometimes you want the E-liter for range. Longest range weapon in the game, by the way. Sometimes you want that for range. Other times you want 600 per shot. It's pretty nasty. Whatever you prefer out of these weapons in S tier is personal opinion, but for me, I think the E-liter bloody kills everything. Like Goo Tuber, the only good thing about the Goo Tuber is that its tap shots do 80, which is the highest of any charger. So I'm talking tap shots, not partials, okay? So when you tap shot, it does 80, which means you can tap shot a stinger. Its partials, which is when you sort of like quarter charge it, a third charge it, half charge it, however long you hold it for, have the ability to do between 80 and 200. So the way you should use a Goo Tuber is by tap shot and a partial charge. For me, it's just kind of dumb, I'm not gonna lie. Why would I want to tap shot with a Goo Tuber instead of using a shooter? Please someone tell me. It takes forever for this weapon to charge. It does pierce, which is nice, and it does one shot a Steelhead. It does 300 fully charged, but you get more DPS out of it by tap shotting and partial charges. But why would you rather that instead of a shooter? Why would you rather that instead of a Swiffer, instead of an E-liter? You can argue about Bamboo or Goo because I feel like they kind of serve the same purpose, but I think Goo is objectively worse in many, actually, let's do this. I think a Goo is objectively worse, is the worst charger in the entire class, and there's so many other weapons that I would rather have before I ever have to have the Goo Tuber. It paints well, cool, but so do shooters, so do most other weapons. Oh, it damages really well with tap shots, cool, so does the Reflux and so does the Tri-Stringer. I'd rather have them. Like, you can't convince me it's a good weapon. No matter how, I know there's going to be people coming into my chat and being like, did you know you can squid bag with a Goo Tuber fully charged? And I'll be like, yes, I know, I've done it. It's funny, but I don't care. Pencil, Snipe Writer. Ooh, this weapon's had a glow up. So when it was first introduced in Splatoon 3, its damage was appalling. It was so bad, and it couldn't kill anything, it couldn't pierce, and you were kind of just like, what does this charger do if it can't kill anything and it can't pierce? Kind of useless. Its paint wasn't good, its efficiency wasn't good, its mobility wasn't good. It has the unique ability to store 5 charges at once, right? But it just kind of felt a bit useless and a bit like, what's the point of it, right? But, and here's the but, here's why it's a goated weapon now, is because it got a damage buff. So I've just checked it. When it was released, its one fully charged shot did 180 damage. It got buffed to 240. So now its individual shots do 240. Yes, it doesn't pierce, but if you hit all 5 shots on the same target, that's 1200 damage. It's about the same as the E-liter in a way, but I think you can get more DPS off of the Sniper if you talk about like how quickly things can do and ink efficiency and things, because the Sniper is able to shoot off more shots than an E-liter before it needs to recharge its ink, but the E-liter pierces. So again, it depends on what you value. Do you want something that can pierce, can't put out as much DPS quickly, or do you want something that you don't care about piercing but that can shoot things a lot quicker? The Sniper, in my opinion, is very similar to the E-liter in terms of what it can contribute to a comp and what it contributes to Salmon Run. So I will put it next to this. It's also so valuable against Horrorboros and anything that's got range. The Sniper can shoot fish sticks out of the sky before they land if you hit all your shots. It's quite difficult to do, but it is possible. The only issue with the Sniper is that you do struggle a bit up close, whereas the E-liter can pierce enemies, and that means an E-liter can prevent lessers swarming on it a bit better than the Sniper can. So, but again, I think that's like playstyles and things. I don't think it suffers that much. Actually, no. Actually, I will say I have noticed that E-liter fits into more comps than Sniper does. Okay, so sometimes I would rather have an E-liter or a Squiffer than a Sniper, but sometimes I would rather have a Sniper. So I think it just depends on the comp a bit more with a Sniper. But I still think at 1200 damage per 5 shots, insane damage. There's no way it can't belong in S tier. And again, I feel like if you're watching this and listening to me say that, then it's a skill issue. I'm sorry, and I'm joking. Just practice a bit more with it and understand like the reason why it's so good. And the final thing is, I also feel like for a charger, it doesn't have poor ink efficiency like some of the other chargers do. Like particularly the next one we're going to talk about, the Sniper, it has good ink refill and things like that. If you charge up 5 shots but only shoot 3 of them, you don't lose ink for the 2 you didn't use. So things like that are really helpful with the Sniper. Its tap shots are decent as well, can do 60 per tap shots. You can take out Stinger by tap shotting with the Sniper as well, which is slightly better than the E-liter. Again, swings and roundabouts, mate. What do you prefer? Right, we're going to talk about the worst charger, and I know people are going to be like, wow, you would rather play the bamboo than this. Yes, I would rather play a lot of weapons than the vanilla charger. And the reason for that is because it is outclassed again. It's the same reason for the Nova, actually. It is outclassed in every single way by every other weapon. If you want something that paints better, the Goo does it. If you want something with better range, all the E-liter and Sniper does it. If you want something better with damage, then the E-liter and the Squiffer does it. What does the vanilla charger do that the other weapons can't? My answer to that is nothing. It does 300 per fully charged shot, which is what the Goo does. Its tap shots do 50 to 150, which is what the E-liter does. The Goo's better. The vanilla charger is honestly, I think, one of the worst weapons in the game, bar none, because I just don't think it offers anything of value. It doesn't work with a lot of comps, and I feel like it really suffers up close as well. Its ink efficiency is so poor. Why do you only get 4 shots per tank? I think it's 4 shots. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, that's the E-liter gets the same. Why would you pick the V charger over the E-liter? I actually think I might put it in F. I think it's going to be the first weapon I put in F. Yeah, I am actually, because when I see the V charger in a rotation, I'm unhappy and it puts me off playing. So there, that's the metric that I'm going to use for the F tier. I don't think there's anything redeemable about it at all. And if you disagree with me, you really need to tell me why, because Why would you pick the V charger over any other charger? I mean, I'd pick the Squiffer any day, the Eliter any day. The Snipe Brighter doesn't pierce, but it has so much else going for it. It's the same with the Bamboo, like it can move a bit, it's got a lightweight status. The Goo can paint, it can tap shot and do partials. What does the V charger do? It's vanilla in every sense of the word. It really needs a buff, unfortunately. Dualies, kind of, I will compare them to shooters in a way. They're obviously different to shooters in that they have the dodge rolls, right? And they'll have some perks that go with the dodge rolls. But by and large, when you see Dualies in a comp, you kind of use them the same way as shooters. So there will be comparison to shooters. So Dapple Dualies. Is it an X tier weapon? Certainly in Splatoon 2 it was. I think it got slightly nerfed for Splatoon 3 Salmon Run. If I believe correctly, someone confirm, I think it did 45 damage in Splatoon 2 and now it does 40 in Splatoon 3 for Salmon Run. So, you know, you have to sort of wonder why on earth they did that, but also factor it in. Saying that, I don't think there's many other things that make it a bad weapon at all and why it shouldn't be in bottom of X rank. It makes me feel invincible, much like the Sploosh does, but I prefer the Sploosh because it has slightly better damage and I just find it a bit easier to use with the height. The Dapples have the same issue with, you know, being quite short, but it does have the ability to dodge roll, which helps concentrate its fire into one stream and improve the accuracy. So again, I think it's preference whether you prefer the Sploosh or the Dapples, and for me it's the Sploosh, but generally speaking, the Dapples can do everything. There's not anything it can't do, and it's the same for the Sploosh. If you can't reach a steelhead, you need to jump. If you can reach fish sticks, no problem. It's got great ink efficiency, it's fast, it's mobile, it does everything. You need to be the DPS when you've got a Dapples on your team, and even if you've got a teammate with DPS, it just makes the whole comp more powerful. So even though it does have a couple of negatives, it's still an X rank weapon in my opinion, because I don't know what it suffers against. Like, I don't think there's an enemy that it suffers against. The only thing that it will suffer against is if you overextend and run out of ink because you're having too much fun, which we've all done. Hey look, here's another F rank F tier weapon, and everybody who knows me is not going to be surprised by this, but we're going to talk about the problem with the Tetra Dualies. The problem is everything. So I actually wanted to make a video guide about the Tetras, and I could not think of a single positive thing to say about this weapon. And I'm not even like doing any hyperbole or anything like that. I'm not exaggerating that. I genuinely started writing the script and I could not think about a positive thing to say about it. And one of the things that I really like about my video sort of advice guides with the weapon is that I will try to always find a positive. In my opinion, there is nothing positive about the Tetras. Its ink efficiency is god awful for some reason. Like, why on earth does it feel like it's so heavy? Its dodge rolls, the 4 dodge rolls, you can tell me, you can sit there and type in the comments that, oh, it's got 4 dodge rolls. But why do you need 4 dodge rolls in Salmon Run? You don't. And the end lag on the 4th dodge roll is atrocious. It's honestly one of the worst things in this game. Why on earth does it lag so badly when you finish that dodge roll? And I'm talking purely from a Salmon Run perspective here. I understand why it does in PvP, and I understand why they're good in PvP to a certain extent, why people like playing with them. But all the reasons why they are good in PvP do not apply to Salmon Run. It's 4 dodge rolls, useless. You only ever need 1 or 2 maximum. Its damage is appalling as well. What are the benefits that it gets from when it dodge rolls? It is the weakest Dualie, but there are other weapons that have the same. There are other Dualies that have the same damage. So the Tetras do 30 damage, right? They have a fall off of 25. You know, it's kind of average when you compare it to other sort of basic shooters as well. The other good thing about the Tetras, and I know people are going to tell me that it's why it's good, is that you can continually fire your weapon whilst dodge rolling. So no other Dualie does that. Like, you have to dodge roll then fire, dodge roll then fire. With the Tetras, you can continue to fire whilst dodge rolling. I understand why that was good in PvP, but I don't think it makes a damn difference in Salmon Run. It just makes you run out of ink quicker. Tell me what's good about it and I may reconsider this, but Worst weapon in Salmon Run in the entire game, bar none. I don't enjoy it. If I see that in a rotation, imagine my surprise when I see a V charger and a Tetra in a rotation. Do you think I play the game? I do not. Those weapons are useless. There's also good. I know for a fact there's going to be one other weapon in F tier, and you imagine my if they ever come in a rotation, you won't see me. I'll be in Hawaii. So Dowser Dualies. When I last did this tier list, the Dowser Dualies had, I think, only just come out, and so like I didn't want to give an opinion with them because I hadn't played them outside of maybe like 2 or 3 games with them. Now that I've played with them a bit, I don't think they're great. I don't think they're as bad as I originally thought. I did at one point almost put them on the same tier as Tetra, but I do appreciate they do a bit more damage, and it's interesting dodge roll mechanic in that its fire rate rapidly increases after a dodge roll is kind of nice actually against high HP bosses like Cohocks and Big Shots. The problem with the Dowsers is that its ink tank is so bad. I think it recently got a buff. I think they realised that its ink efficiency was so poor and that they reduced the ink consumption following a dodge roll. So I haven't had the chance to actually test that out in practice. But the fact that you can only do 1 dodge roll that's got quite poor end lag, you don't get any other sort of benefits from dodge rolling other than your fire rate being increased. I feel like it's outclassed, and you know, there's a couple of Dualies here that outclass, well, actually all 3 of the Dualies I'm about to discuss after this outclass them in a lot of different ways. So while the Dowsers I don't think are dreadful, you know, because their range is quite nice, so they can dodge roll quite far, and it's quite nice in Salmon Run, I do think the negatives associated with it make it worse than why it should be good. So for me, it goes in C tier. I think I would still rather have it than these weapons, but I don't enjoy them and I don't think they're good, but I don't think they're terrible. So I just think they're outclassed. They don't really do anything unique in Salmon Run, you know. And the things that are unique about it don't make it good in Salmon Run. That's what I should say. The Dualie Squelchers are a weird one because objectively, on the surface, they're kind of trash. Before the Dowsers were released, the Dualies were the longest range Dualies in the game, and they kind of had that as their one thing. But now the Dowsers, I think, outrange them. They don't have great damage either. They have 30 damage in Salmon Run, which, like, if you compare it to PvP, right? In PvP, the Dualie Squelchers do 28 damage. They only do 30 in Salmon Run. Why? I feel like they forgot to buff it. So I feel like one of the things that would help the Dualie Squelchers if they buffed it, even just to 40, maybe 40 is too high, but 35, right? That would help it. Its ink efficiency and its mobility is really good, and I also think its range is really good as well. The Dualie Squelchers I tend to play without dodge rolling. I tend to play it as a shooter with nice range, because if you think about it, if you compare it to a Jet Squelcher, they more or less are the same sort of role, in that the only difference is the Jet Squelcher has slightly longer range and the Dualie Squelchers can dodge roll, right? But they more or less perform the same way. So I don't objectively think the Dualie Squelchers are bad, or that they can't have a niche or contribute to a team, but I also don't think they do much either. It's nice that they have a bit more mobility and their dodge rolls are a bit more fluid than others. You don't feel like you get locked into a place with a dodge roll. I don't think they're terrible, but I do, again, compared to the Dapples and then compared to the next 2 I'm going to talk about, I think they're outclassed. Gluga Dualies, my favourite Dualies, I want to say. In Salmon Run, can't play them in PvP, but in Salmon Run, they're amazing. They're very fun, but I'm going to get a lot of people tell me that they're quite hard to use, and I appreciate that. They are quite hard to use. They're not intuitive, and they can be quite sluggish, and they kind of, if you wanted to compare them to shooters, you would say they're more aligned with something like a H3 or a Pro or a Squeezer or even a 96 in the way they function. They're kind of mid-range, high damage, but kind of slow. The Gluga Dualies do 45 damage per shot, but the interesting thing about the Glugas is that when you dodge roll, when you enter turret mode, your shots do 70 damage. They're the only Dualie that's damage is increased by dodge rolling. So the main thing with the Glugas is that you have to dodge roll, but this becomes a problem in Salmon Run because of lessers, because of missiles, because of rain, because of scrappers, you name it, right? So it can become really tricky to fully maximize the potential of the Gluga Dualies, and I appreciate that it can become quite tricky. The Gluga Dualies, when you play without dodge rolling, they feel like a worse version of the Splatshot Pro or the H3. You're kind of not doing anything with them. But when you dodge roll with them, and they get the 2 dodge roll, but they kind of have a bit of an end lag with the dodge roll, you are able to kill things a lot quicker. So again, I think it's a preference, but I think its damage and its ability to be a strong shooter that can dodge roll really sets it apart from every other Dualie in its class. I don't think it's the best Dualie, but I do think it's a strong contender. The other issue is that it does struggle in protecting itself because of its ink consumption. Its dodge rolls and general ink consumption is quite harsh, especially compared to all other Dualies, maybe apart from the Dowsers. And you know, you're penalised if you throw a bomb. You don't really want to throw a bomb with this weapon, so you can sort of struggle with it if the spawns are not right, or if the comp can't support you with paint. The Glugers, again, doesn't necessarily paint very well for anything other than itself, so if you haven't got paint on the field and you've got a bunch of rain and scrappers, you're going to have a hard time. I do think it's a good weapon, and I do think its damage makes it good, so I think I would put it at the bottom of A tier. I might change this. I might put it at the top of B tier. For now, I think the fact that it does really well. You just have to learn how to play with it, I think. You have to be safe with it, and you have to really sort of think, can I dodge roll here and live to tell the story? So the Splat Dualies, the vanilla Splat Dualies, I think probably, maybe apart from the Dapples, is probably the best in its class because it is so strong as an all-rounder. It only does 30 damage and it doesn't get an increase in damage when it dodge rolls. When dodge rolling with the Splat Dualies, its fire rate is slightly increased. It also has a really good ink tank, it has really good mobility, it has really good ink efficiency. Again, I would put it in line with things like the Splattershot and the 52 in that it can do absolutely everything quite well and has no major weakness. And then it can also dodge roll to save your life. So for the dodge rolling, I would put it above the Splattershot because it can save your life. But the Splat Dualies, there isn't a comp where it doesn't fit in my opinion. And the only thing that stops it from being an X rank weapon is its damage. Other than that, I think it's actually so solid and fits in everywhere and is a really good addition to any team. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't think it's as strong as the other weapons that are above it. That's all. Time to talk about rollers, which something to consider when playing any of these rollers is that they functionally work very different from all other weapons in the game, in that during Salmon Run, one of the best ways to utilize them is by rolling with them. It's not the same for PvP, obviously, and you don't have to worry about getting sniped out of existence if you're using a roller and just rolling with it. The problem comes with rolling and rollers in Salmon Run due to the bounce back. So depending on which roller you're using, you can't crush everything in front of you or stun things in front of you, so you tend to bounce a lot, and that hinders some rollers compared to others. Other rollers have ways of mitigating that problem, but the fact of the matter is, one of the biggest reasons why rollers suffer in Salmon Run is because of that. The hitbox on things can cause you to be sucked in, like almost magnetized. I don't know if anybody else have experienced this, but you'll be sort of rolling with any of the rollers and you'll get pulled into a Steel Eel or a Moors. No other weapon does that to you. So rollers have this unique disadvantage of kind of being shit in Salmon Run for things like that because of the janky hitbox and sort of the janky nature of the game. It gets worse the worse a roller is. A prime example of this is the Big Swig roller. It does not do anything well, in my opinion, and I know I'm going to get heat for this because people are going to be like, it paints well. You don't want a roller to be painting for you in Salmon Run. I don't care what you say. If I want paint, I want it from a shooter. I want something that's not going to run out of ink after flicking with it 4 times. I want something that's not going to be bounced off or that can't hit a drizzler well. The Big Swig is also objectively the weakest roller in that its horizontal does 150 and its vertical does 160. The Carbon does 160 and 160 for both horizontal and vertical. The Big Swig does 150 horizontal. So if you're talking about damage, then the Carbon already outweighs it in a sense and is faster and it's got better ink efficiency. The only thing that the Big Swig is good at now, and it got buffed because it wasn't the case when the Big Swig came out, is that it can roll over chum. Its roll does 100 damage. So for it to be able to successfully roll over small fright and chum, that does make it good. But literally, aside from the carbon roller, every other roller can do that as well. I do not think the Big Swig offers anything of value to a team, and I'm tempted to put it in F rank, but I think I'm going to put it in C rank because there is another roller that I'm going to put in F rank because it's slightly worse. I'm sorry if you like the Big Swig. I appreciate that it turfs and I appreciate that it can roll over chum and it's got a wide sort of thing, but I don't care. The Dynamo does that as well. Carbon roller. So people are going to be like, how can you dislike the Big Swig for not having good damage but then prefer the carbon roller? And it's really simple actually, because the carbon roller, to offset its weak damage, has incredibly good ink efficiency and mobility. So it doesn't paint well, it doesn't have good damage, and you're going to find it hard to be a slayer with a carbon roller, but you can be everywhere you want to be and you can throw bombs at everything. And if you know how to use roller tech in Salmon Run, you can get multiple damage per one roll on things. A lot easier with carbon roller than you can do with Big Swig. Saying all of that, it cannot roll over chum. It does 70 damage per roll, and I do feel like that holds it back quite substantially, and it causes you to bounce. But it recently had a buff to the way it sort of vertically flicks, and I already have noticed the benefits of that. So its vertical flicks feel a lot more consistent with what you think you should be doing with them. 160 per vertical and 160 per horizontal. It is on par with the Big Swig for being weak, but you don't play the carbon to be a slayer. You don't play the carbon like other rollers, and I would honestly recommend, if you're playing the carbon roller like other rollers where you're rolling around and bouncing off everything, then that's the problem you're having. You do more damage quicker and safer by actually flicking with it. Horizontal or vertical, it doesn't matter. You've got the ink efficiency to be able to deal with that as well. So I would caution you not to use this carbon roller the same way that you would use all other rollers, and to be a bit more mobile and a bit more flexible with your flick shots with it. Saying all of that, I still think it belongs in the C rank because it's not that great. I think I would rather these weapons before it. So carbon really struggles with steelheads, and I think the mark of a bad weapon is whether they struggle with steelheads. And if you look in my C rank, almost all the weapons here struggle with steelheads, maybe apart from Gucci and Rapid Pro. Dynamo roller. Where am I going to put Dynamo roller? It's great. It does 400 damage when you roll over something, so you can one-shot Cohox with rolling, which is insane. But then what else does it do? Okay, so its rolling is good, but if you're bouncing off things and you haven't got the space or the safety to roll, then what do? Well, its vertical flicks do 300, which is great. You can one-shot steelheads if you get their timing right. You can put a lot of damage on things with your vertical flicks, but they're quite ink hungry. Its horizontal flicks do 200 as well, and I haven't tried the Dynamo since the recent patch, and the recent patch fixed the Dynamo's hitbox a bit, so I'm assuming it's translated over to Salmon Run, but you do have that sort of awkward issue sometimes where you horizontally flick at something with a Dynamo and it just misses it completely. So for that reason in Salmon Run, you get more sort of success by vertically flicking with a Dynamo. For if you want straight up 300 damage on something and you can't roll it, vertical flick with it, or you want to paint, vertical flick. The only time that I choose to use horizontal flicks over vertical flicks is during Mothership, because during Mothership you want to try and hit as many different crates as possible with one swing. You can't repeatedly swing with a Dynamo, so you want to try and catch 3 or 4 Chinooks with one swing. You can't really do that with a vertical flick. I love the Dynamo. I think it's wonderful. Again, it's one of my favourite weapons to play. It's really fun, you know. For rush it's goated, for seeking it's goated, even for grillers it's really good on some maps because you can just roll over the grillers. Saying all of that, it is a weapon that requires a lot of practice and time to put in with, because it's hard. In Splatoon 2, I think it was actually harder because its ink efficiency was worse. They've since buffed that for Splatoon 3, and it's made a world of a difference for Salmon Run because now you don't run out of ink as much, and I feel like you can get more value out of that. So for the fact that it got that buff keeps it as a high tier weapon. But in terms of would I prefer the Dynamo over things like the S-Blast, the 10 to the Luna, the 52, more often than not the answer is no, and the reason for that is comp. Like, the Dynamo needs fast mobile weapons to support it, but it also needs a weapon with range to support it, because you don't want your Dynamo being the range. You can't reliably guarantee that your Dynamo will not be having trouble with other things. Yes, it's nice that it can roll over big shots and roll over Cohocs, but you're gonna struggle with ink efficiency, and you're going to struggle with range. Top A tier, because I do think that it's better than all the other weapons in A tier, but would I prefer it over the weapons in S tier? Not many times I would. Flingser. Flingser is kind of like your B-Tech Dynamo. The funny thing about Flingser is its vertical flicks do the exact same as the Dynamo. So they both do 300. Problem is sometimes with the Flingser is that you miss your shot and do 299.9 damage, which is very frustrating on steelheads. But for the most part, you don't really encounter that issue. The problem with Flingser is, like every other roller, is that sometimes it's really hard to use it in Salmon Run if the spawns are not right and if you don't have other teammates helping support you. You're going to struggle against rain, you're going to struggle against flyfish, you're going to struggle against moors. These are things that the rollers can deal with, but in terms of time, efficiency and effectiveness of your weapon, it's not ideal. The Flingser has good paint support compared to a lot of other rollers, and I do appreciate that it's good in that sense, and the fact that it can one-shot steelheads and it can more or less one-shot Cohocs if you know how to do roller tech, where you sort of flick and then roll into something and get multiple hits on something very quickly. I mean, it's better than all the other rollers apart from Dynamo. I just don't know where to put it, because its rolling is 125 as well. So rolling, you can roll over Chum and Small Fry with no problem. And I think it just suffers in a way that all other rollers suffer, in that you will just be a victim of janky hitboxes and bouncing off things. So I think for that reason, I'll put it at the top of C tier. It's fine, I think, actually. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't know if that's the right choice though, because I respect that the Flingser can one-shot a couple of things and that it does have decent damage compared to other rollers. Let's talk about the worst roller in the game, the Splat roller. And it's a bad roller for the same reason that the V-Charger is a bad charger. Since the introduction of rollers like the Big Swig, the Carbon, the Flingser and the Dynamo, the Splat roller has nothing. It has absolutely nothing. Nothing is good about it. The only thing that is slightly good about it is that it does 200 for horizontal and 200 for vertical flicks, but it's slow. It bounces off things. The fact that the Carbon is weaker than it still doesn't make the Splat roller better than it. The Carbon has much better things about it. Its ink efficiency is so poor as well. Like, why do you feel like you have no ink with the Splat roller? It struggles to slay any boss. It struggles with everything. I can't name you one good thing about it, and it's terribly outclassed. I know I said the Tetras were probably the worst weapon in the game, but I think the Splat roller is actually the worst weapon in the game, because if I looked at a rotation and I had to pick between Tetras and Splat roller, I'd pick Tetras, because Tetras are a gun, right? You know, you can shoot with them, it's easier. Splat roller you really do struggle with. I just don't think it's worth ever being in a comp, and if there's ever a comp where it's V-Charger, Tetras and Splat rollers, oof, awful. And again, if you think I'm being too harsh, please tell me. I just, you know, you have to sort of put it in comparison to every other roller in the game. The Big Swig paints better than it. The Carbon has better movement and ink efficiency. The Flingser does more damage and paints better than it. And the Dynamo obviously has more damage. So what does the Splat roller have? Nothing. Let's move on to brushes. So there's only 3 brushes in the game, and so it's the smallest weapon class, I think, apart from, you know, the Splatanas and the Stringers as well. And so when we talk about brushes, you can only ever really compare it to the other 2 in its class. But I feel the interesting thing about this is that the paintbrush is not comparable to the other two brushes. And so what do you end up comparing the paintbrush to? Not an awful lot. The paintbrush is a very unique weapon. And so I feel like it doesn't really come into the conversation when you're talking about the ink brush and the octobrush. The ink brush and the octobrush have been in the game forever. The ink brush was, again, notoriously one of the worst weapons in Splatoon 2 Salmon Run because it was so ineffective. It did nothing and you couldn't damage anything with it. Its AoE spread was garbage, and the fact that it was fast didn't mean anything. You just couldn't do anything. But now in Splatoon 3 and Salmon Run, you kind of value a few things that the ink brush has. It has its mobility, and it has its ability to be everywhere and everything and recover ink and help with statics. So I think whilst it's not in F tier, I do think it's going to be at the bottom of C tier because it's really tricky to fully maximize. It's comp dependent. It only does 36 per swing, right? And if you have an issue with your hands or you're not able to, repeatedly mash your button, you're not going to get much out of it in terms of DPS. If you bump into something, it's 40 damage. So you will bump off lots of things if you're running around with it as well. The ink brush can crush small fry, so that's a nice thing about it, but that's all it can crush. Otherwise it will bounce off things. I don't mind the ink brush personally, and if this was a tier list of weapons that I like playing with, I'd probably put it in B tier because I find it quite fun and I quite like the challenge of a difficult weapon. And like I said, I think there are things in Splatoon 3 that are different about Salmon Run that you really need to prioritize outside of just objective damage. I feel like for those reasons the ink brush does well, but compared to other weapons in its class, nah. I don't know where to put it. I'm going to put it here, and I'll tell you why I put it over Dowsers. A, because of the ink efficiency, and I think the Dowsers don't offer anything that other Dualies can't offer. And the reason why I put it over the Goo Tuber is for the same reason. I'd rather have something a bit faster. If I'm going to have a weak weapon, I'd rather have mobility. That's why I value the carbon a bit better as well. The octobrush is kind of in a weird position because I prefer the ink brush to the octobrush. So the octobrush is bad for all the same reasons as the ink brush, except that it does slightly more damage. It can do 60 damage per swing. The offset is that it's a bit slower, and a bigger offset is that its ink efficiency is poor. It did get buffed in an update during Splatoon 3's lifespan for Salmon Run, but I still don't think it's good enough. I still don't think this weapon offers you anything that the ink brush can't offer you, and for that reason it goes below. It goes here. I still would rather it over the big swig, to be honest, but if I have to choose between the ink brush and the octobrush, I will always pick the ink brush because of its mobility and efficiency. The octobrush cannot offer me anything good here, and I just don't think it's worth having. There is a part of me that wants to put it in F tier, but I don't think it's worse than the big swig. You struggle to, again, repeatedly mash with the octobrush, then you're not going to have a good time with it. But even if you're one of these people that can mash with it, or you've got one of those turbo controllers, why would you pick it over the ink brush anyway? The ink brush can do that. Ink brush might have less damage, but I feel like its other things are better. And then we come to the paintbrush, which is it doesn't feel like a brush, but it is a brush. It's interesting. It does 150 per maximum flick, right? So the thing with brushes is that I'll say, oh, it does 150, but you might not get 150 damage on something because of the way brushes work. So the maximum flick it can get is 150 and the minimum is 75. If you compare that to the ink brush is 36 and 25. You're doing over 100 damage more with the paintbrush. This is why it doesn't feel like a brush to me. The paintbrush is objectively quite powerful. The problem is it is slow and it gets overrun really easily. The way I view it is I view it in the same way as I view the Gluga Dualies, and I view the Range Blaster, and I view the Dynamo. And that objectively they are powerful. Their shots can really do amazing things. You can one cycle bosses, but your ink efficiency holds you down, or your mobility holds you down. And for that reason, I think I will put paintbrush in top B. I think it's good, but I think because of its poor ink efficiency and because of its slow movement, it is comp dependent on whether you're going to get a lot out of it. But its damage is great. It does help it. It helps it go a long way. And a long way is from C tier to B tier. Sloshers are an interesting category. The majority of sloshers in this game are very, very good. Honestly, there are barely any issues with sloshers in Salmon Run, especially since a couple of them got buffed. No slosher is objectively bad, in my opinion, and the way to compare them is to compare what you want out of them or what they can do well. We'll start with the Bloblobber, which is unique to every slosher because of the way its shots bounce and ricochet off walls, and that it has no fall-off damage penalty. So your blobs will always do 60 individually, and it shoots off 4. So you can hit things from quite substantially far away and still guarantee that you will do 60 damage. Its ink efficiency is great. Its range is so good for a slosher. You can bounce your shots and fling your shots in weird and wonderful ways, which allows you to get multiple hits on multiple different enemies. But also, given that you can do 240 damage with one shot, things like big shots and drizzlers are so easy to manage. The Bloblobber, I think, is so solid, and I remember doing this on my stream and people were like, the Bloblobber is rated too high, but I actually don't think it's rated high enough. I think the Bloblobber can fill the majority of roles in Salmon Run. Like, if you want a Slayer, the Bloblobber can do that, and if you can't do that, that's a skill issue. You can get steelheads very easily, you just need some practice. If you want paint, if you want support, if you want help, you can do that fine. The only thing the Bloblobber suffers with is if you are out of position or if you get swarmed by enemies very quickly, then you're going to have quite a hard time sort of managing that. But the key to weapons like that, and it's the same with the S-Blast, it's the same with the Tenter, is by pacing yourself and knowing where to stand to get the most out of your weapon. Blob, I think, is low S tier because I feel like, again, it works with pretty much every single comp you put it in. I don't know a comp where you go, the Blob doesn't work here. Because if you need it to paint, it can paint. If you need it for range, it's got range. If you need it for slaying, it can slay. If you need it for lessers, it can do that. I think it's fantastic. So we're going to talk about the best slosher in the game now, and this slosher came out in Splatoon 3, and I remember the first time I used the Dreadringer in Salmon Run, I thought it was broken, as in I thought there's something wrong with this weapon, they need to fix it. Because I thought how powerful it is was not meant to be a thing. It does 125 per slosh, but it does 2 sloshes at the same time. So if you get both sloshes on something, it's 250 damage per slosh. It's objectively the most powerful slosher in the game. The only one that is comparable to it in terms of damage is the Bloblobber, but the Bloblobber you have to hit all of your shots and it's slightly slower. The Dreadringer is just one fling where 2 of your long range huge shots just hit a target. So things like Cohocks, Steelheads, Eels, Lids, Scrappers, 2 shots. Things like Drizzlers and big shots, 4 shots or 5 shots. My point is, its damage is insane, and I genuinely thought it was a problem. I was like, no, they're gonna fix it and I'm gonna be sad because it's not gonna be the same. Turns out they're not gonna fix it because that's it. It's also got great painting ability, and the fact that it's a slosher means you can arc your shots up and over things and get lots of residual damage on things. It also doesn't have fall off, so it's always 125 per slosh, 250 maximum damage. It's insane. it's quite frankly one of the best weapons in the game, bar none. And there are so many times where you would want a powerful slosher on your comp for maps like Spawning Grounds and Jammin' Salmon Junction, where you can utilize height and ledges and platforms to your advantage. The Dreadringer is insane. The only downside with the Dreadringer, is you do get punished if you use bombs. Its ink efficiency isn't as good as the other weapons in X tier. So for that reason, that's why it's going to be at the bottom of X tier, because I feel like it does struggle only slightly with certain spawns that the other weapons will not struggle as much with. If there's too much rain, if there's too many missiles, and if there's too many Moors, the Dreadringer will suffer a little bit. Other than that, there's nothing it will suffer with, in my opinion. And for most situations, for most compositions, for most rotors, the Dreadringer will provide invaluable damage, DPS and support for nearly every single comp. The Slosher. You know, when I did this tier list a few months ago, I rated it quite highly because of its ability to pierce and its range, and obviously its ability to kill flyfish and mudmouths with the weapon rather than using bombs. So if you think about that in a comp, if you've got an Slosher, you don't ever have to use bombs as much because your Explo will take care of that. So that's huge, and I'm not understating how big that is, right? But outside of that, the Explo suffers more in Splatoon 3 than it ever did in Splatoon 2. It really does struggle to keep up at HLM. It gets swarmed by lessers, and its damage at 125 means that it generally does struggle a bit against high HP. The Slosher does have a sort of a unique way of hitting things. So it's 125 for the direct hit, but then it also deals 75 when the hit lands on the ground. So if you are able to get the projectile as a direct and then land the hit on the same enemy, it's 200 damage. Most of the time you are using an Slosher, you don't really do it that way. You want to, its ability to pierce is quite frankly like life-changing. It's really, really useful to have something that can pierce. When you don't have a charger or a comp that has any AoE, your Slosher becomes so much more valuable for its ability to pierce. But the offset of that is you won't put as much damage on things because you're piercing things. The Explo really is a niche weapon that works amazing sometimes and then other times struggles like hell. And I find it really hard to position it on a tier list for that reason, because yes, it excels against flyfish and mudmouth, and its ability to pierce, its ability to paint is also really good as well. But it's a heavyweight weapon. Its damage sucks. Its ink efficiency and mobility sucks. It really gets overwhelmed quickly at high tide, at hazard level max. So where do we put it? It really is a tricky one. I don't think it's a bad weapon, and I have a lot of fun playing with it, and you know, it's very unique, and you shouldn't sort of understate how fun it can be to play with unique weapons. The way it interacts with Salmon Run is a testament to how fun the game can be with a lot of different sort of niche and unique weapons. But how much value does it offer a team? If you get a team with no paint and you're the paint, you're going to struggle. If you get a team with no mobility, you're going to struggle. You need a good comp with you. For that reason, I think I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. I think it's right in the middle, essentially. I don't think you should compare the Explo to just the other Sloshers. I feel like you should compare it to every single weapon in the game because of its ability to kill flyfish, okay? Every single weapon in the game has to kill flyfish, okay? Whether you like it or not, whether I tell you not to use bombs or not, you still have to use bombs, okay? Or you're special. So the Explo being able to take that off of you and have it be good for that means that it is a good weapon. But other than that, it's not as good as the weapons that come before it, and like I said, it's extremely comp dependent. You know what, if they buffed its damage to something like 250, be life changer for it, mate. It'd probably be S tier. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. This is an interesting weapon. I hated this weapon for the longest time because I thought it was useless, and genuinely in Splatoon 2, in Salmon Run, it was useless. It was probably the worst slosher in the game, maybe comparable with the machine, but it did nothing. Yes, it had the ability to arc its shots, and it's got its AoE spread and things like that, but other than that, the regular slosher didn't do much. But in Splatoon 3, during Salmon Run's lifetime, it got buffed. Its damage now does 140 per direct. Its indirects also do 140. It's 140 damage flat, so it doesn't suffer from like shot decay or fall off. It also has the ability to arc its shots quite well, and its range, I feel, is quite deceptive. It's got good DPS in that it's fast, it's mobile, so it only does 140 per shot, but you can get off so many shots from a slosher, especially if you compare it to the other three sloshers that we've already spoken about, the Dreadringer, the Blobber, and the Explo. The slosher is faster than all three of them, and I feel like that counts for something. So for that reason, I'm going to put it at the bottom of A tier. think I'm going to put it above the Brellas because its range is nice and your ability to arc shots goes a long way with Sloshers because you can take strange positions and you can shoot over things no other weapons in the game can. Do I think it's great? I think it's good, but I do think it has some problems against things like Cohocks and being overwhelmed by big HP bosses. But I think it's solid and I think it does a really good job of sort of filling in a Slayer role if you need it, but also being able to help with, you know, total damage on everything with your teammates. The problem as well with a Slosher, it free shots a Steelhead. I think it's probably the only weapon in here. Yeah, it is. It's the only weapon in A tier that free shots us outside of the shooters and the Dualies. It's the only weapon in A tier that takes free shots to kill a Steelhead. But I do think its utility outside of that is worth it being in A tier. Sloshing machine. So when the game came out, I'm sure everybody knows this, but if you don't know this, when Splatoon 3 came out, the sloshing machine was broken. Its ability to spam shots was quite frankly disgusting. And so unsurprisingly, it did get nerfed. Its fire rate got nerfed. And that nerf unfortunately carried over to Salmon Run because I believe the devs probably saw it as a bug because it wasn't like that in Splatoon 2. So sadly, it got nerfed. The good thing about the sloshing machine though is that I still think it's a solid weapon in spite of its nerf. Before the nerf, I'd have put it in S tier, but with the nerf, I'll probably put it in low A or high B. I still think it's solid. It does 170 damage as well, which is more than the regular slosher, but it doesn't paint as well as the regular slosher. And its ability to, like, the shots are thinner, so you have to put a bit more of an effort in aiming your shots. It does also have fall off decay the way the slosher doesn't. So the slosher machine does 170 max damage, but its indirects and its minimum damage do 100. So you do tend to lose some damage there, whereas the slosher doesn't. I do like the sloshing machine because I think its range is really, really good. And, you know, a lot of people go, oh, it's not the same since the nerf, but it's still a solid Slayer. It still has a good ink tank. It still has good mobility and its ability to kill bosses like Steelheads, Big Shots, Drizzlers, and even fish sticks. You can hit a fish stick from the ground and hit 2 or 3 of them at once. Its ability to take care of stingers and flyfish is also quite good. It does 30 more damage than the slosher, but it also has an issue with fall off. So I think the difference between the slosher and the sloshing machine is generally quite minimal, and it comes down to playstyle, what you would prefer. Would you prefer the slosher with a bit more paint and a bit more guarantee with the damage of your shots, or would you prefer the sloshing machine that has a bit more damage for direct shots and potentially a bit more of a way you can arc your shots up and over things? For me, I prefer the machine. Let's talk about the tri-slosher, which unfortunately I think is probably the worst slosher. And I don't think it's the worst slosher because it's objectively bad. I just think every single slosher is better than it. So it does the least amount of damage at 100 per sort of direct hit. Unfortunately with the tri-slosher, it suffers from fall off. So the minimum damage it can do is 60. And I don't know why the tri-slosher suffers this way, and maybe someone can tell me, but in Salmon Run, that fall off really hurts. Given that it has such short range, you want a sort of guarantee that you can do as much damage as possible. But if you're running the risk of potentially losing 40 damage sometimes, then that can really make it tricky to stay on top of things like chums, Cohocks, and some of the other bosses that you might potentially run into problems with around baskets like Scrappers and Steel Ills. It's also, like I've mentioned, got terribly short range, but that's kind of the point about it. It's fast and mobile. It's like if you compared it to other short range weapons and other classes like the Sploosh, the Dapples, the Luna, it's kind of the Slosher's variant of that. The unfortunate thing is I don't feel like it packs a punch the way all of those other weapons do. It's not more powerful than the other Sloshers. Yeah, it's faster and its ink efficiency is nice, meaning you can run around a bit more. But if that's the case, wouldn't you just rather a Sploosh or a Dapples, or even like things like the Splatter Shot, the 52, or the Luna? Its AoE is nice, but again, you run the risk of losing damage from fall off. So I don't think the tri-slosher is objectively bad. I just don't think it's been brought up to the standards of other sloshers for Splatoon 3. Got a buff to its damage, it would do really well because its ink efficiency is great. You know, it's really useful being the person running around going for statics and things like that. You can help quite a lot as a supportive player. But when you're struggling against steelheads and when you're struggling against higher HP bosses, it really does sort of hold you back in a way. For that reason, I think it's going to go at the top of C tier somewhere, the top of C tier. I think it fills a similar role to the carbon and the ink brush. They all kind of suffer with low damage output. God, we're going to talk about one of my favourite weapons in the game now. So we're on to the Splatling class. And the thing about the Splatling class is you have to recognise that they're always at a disadvantage compared to faster weapons because of their inability to shoot fast, okay? So you kind of have to play preemptively with a Splatling. You have to really sort of improve game sense and boss cycles and prioritising things which should die first, and understanding where you should stand, how long you should stand for, and ink efficiency. They're much more punishing when you play Splatlings, and so all Splatlings have that problem that holds them down. It's kind of the same with blasters and their poor ink efficiency. That's one of the things that is equal for all Splatlings, maybe apart from the mini, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But we're going to talk about the best Splatling in Salmon Run, and it's the ballpoint Splatling. You should go watch my video about the ballpoint Splatling. I did it quite recently, and I'm not lying when I say that I love this weapon so much that it is honestly probably one of my favourite weapons in the game as well. In Salmon Run, it is so powerful. Its ability to burst short fire with a huge fire rate equivalent to the junior protects itself up front and doesn't punish you for using partial charges. If you just have to speed through something or you get stuck in a situation, your weapon has been made for you to be okay with that. On the complete flip side is if you don't get stuck in a position like that and you want to shoot a stinger or a fish stick from far away, you can do that with the long range fire. And the way you can flip-flop between both of them is so easy and so seamless. But it isn't a weapon that's quite easy to use. I will admit that. It took me quite a while to warm up to how good the ballpoint is. In Splatoon 2 I didn't like it, but I think it's even better in Splatoon 3 because you value both of its charges more. For a Splatling, it doesn't feel slow. For a Splatling, you don't feel like you're under pressure when you're overwhelmed because you have the short range. You don't get punished for partial charges. I also feel like you don't run out of ink as much as you do compared to others. Like all Splatlings, you really shouldn't throw bombs unless you absolutely have to, but even then with a ballpoint I feel like it can manage it quite well. Its damage is the same as all other Splatlings. All Splatlings do 35 damage, right? We'll talk about the Hydra separately, but just as a base, all Splatlings do 35 damage. All of their minimum damage is 25, so they all have the exact same damage, apart from the Hydra when it's fully charged. So the ballpoint doesn't win any points there, but it certainly doesn't lose any points. Ballpoint for me is the best Splatling in Salmon Run because it can be your slayer, it can be your supportive teammates, it can kill things up close and kill things from far away. But it also doesn't feel like you're weighted down heavily by the fact that it's a Splatling. I feel like I'm invincible when I have this weapon. It goes here for me just because I prefer the other three. Personal preference, but in my opinion they're all the same in terms of how good and what they can offer to a comp. It's just debatable about what you prefer playing with. We're going to talk about the Heavy Edit, which is a very interesting Splatling. It is unique in that when fully charged, its fire rate is amazing. It gets like a perk where if you fully charge the weapon, its fire rate increases compared to partial charges, right? So that alone tells you that you want to try and fully charge the weapon every time you use it, which is difficult in Salmon Run with Splatlings because you don't often get the opportunity to fully charge it, and especially at higher hazards you tend to run the risk of being overwhelmed, or one small fry will come and get you, or you need to paint to run away from some missiles or rain. I don't necessarily think that holds the Heavy Edit back, because I feel like that's the same for every single Splatling. The fact that you have to fully charge the weapon to get a perk out of it does hold it back, and it's going to be the same with the Hydra as well when we get there, in that to fully maximize the weapon you have to fully charge it. Now saying that, I don't think it's a bad weapon at all. I think its movement is really good for a Splatling. Its ink efficiency is solid, and its power again is 35, the same as all others. So I think it's solid, and I think it can comfortably carry itself and protect itself quite well. Again, the things that you struggle with as Splatlings are universal to all Splatlings, so I don't think the edit suffers in any particularly special way. Saying that, where should we put it? I think I'll put it in A tier because I think it does a lot of damage, and I think one of the really good things about the heavy edit and, you know, the heavy Splatling is that they can play backline, frontline, supportive. They can fill quite a lot of roles in Salmon Run because they're able to protect themselves, paint for everyone. They've got the range to help, they've got the power to help. So I don't feel like outside of being a Splatling, they're held back by much. So for me, the edit will go into A tier. I think it will go above the Sloshers. And we're going to have the same conversation about the heavy as well, because the heavy edit and the heavy are kind of similar in a lot of ways. The regular heavy doesn't have any sort of thing like that. It's just a regular Splatling. It's, you know, your vanilla Splatling in a way. So it does feel a bit slower at times, but its damage is the same as the edit. And, you know, for all the reasons that you're going to use the edit, it's the same reason that you'd want to use the heavy as well. I think it's preference at the end of the day, which one you prefer, because the fire rate increase for the edit, while it is nice, it's not hugely changing that would make you really want it. The ballpoint's ability to switch from short fire to long range makes it so valuable in a lot of ways, but just having a slight increase in fire rate without anything else doesn't make the heavy edit that much better than the regular heavy, in my opinion. They both use their weapons in a very similar way, and so I would actually just put them together. For all intents and purposes, you kind of play them the same way anyway, so I think it's preference, whichever you prefer. I personally prefer the heavy edit because it makes a cool sound, but like, that's it, right? And I do appreciate the fire rate increase, so I feel like we have to give it points for that. Okay, the Hydra. The Hydra has the unique ability that when fully charged, its shots do 60 damage. Insane. It's insane. Like, let's be honest. 60 damage with the entire time that you can fire as a Hydra. It's insane. The damage you can do, the things you can kill with one cycle of your Hydra Splatling is insane. You can kill anything and everything, obviously apart from flyfish. Sorry to the one commenter who said that on my Hydra video, by the way. It made me laugh. But yeah, you can kill anything and everything with the Hydra when you're able to fully charge it. The problem therein lies with how often can you fully charge it. You do get penalized for not charging it, because if your weapon has a potential to almost double its damage when fully charged and you can't fully charge it, you are therefore not getting the most out of your weapon. The Hydra is slower to charge than all other Splatlings. Its ink efficiency is worse than all other Splatlings. Your mobility is worse than all other Splatlings. So the payoff is huge. Like, the Hydra is really good against boss salmonids and king salmonids, but for other situations where you've got 5 statics on the field, you know, big shots, stingers and flyfish, and you've got small fry storming you, are you gonna have a good time with this weapon if you can't fully charge it? Me, personally, I love playing with the Hydra, and it's outside of the ballpoint, it's my favourite Splatling to use. But in terms of utility, I can see why people would prefer to have both heavies. I can see why people would prefer to have a Nautilus. You have way more freedom with those weapons than you do with the Hydra, and you don't feel like you're being punished for partially charging those weapons either. For that reason, I think the Hydra will go in A tier, but it kind of has the same niche as a Dynamo. It works really well sometimes, but man, is it comp dependent. Like, if you remember that Spawning Grounds comp with Hydra, bamboo, pencil and something else, and it was, what do? You know, Hydra needs a lot of support to really get the most out of it, and you will get overwhelmed. You will struggle if you've got 100 missiles and rain and big shot rings on you. So I think it belongs in A tier because of its damage, and I think I would rather have it over, say, something like an Explo. I think it's better. The thing is, I can't view the Hydra without viewing it through the lens of myself, and I'm like, oh my god, I love this weapon. Because I'm biased to anything that's long range and powerful and slow. So things like the E-liter, the ballpoint, the 96, the Brellas, these are all some of my favourite weapons, right? And I like that sort of slow, thoughtful play rather than head empty. run in and kill everything in sight, which I do appreciate. I do like playing like that, but for the most part I prefer to be further back and having range and safety on my side. When you're able to fully utilize the Hydra, it's wonderful to have on your team, and I actually think it's more important than the Dynamo. So I think I'm going to put it low S tier, and I might get a lot of heat for this from casual players and sort of overfishers as well, because I think the utility of the Hydra really does depend on the comp. But I think if you've got a comp that works well with it, I think you can get so much out of it. It can one cycle Gorillas, by the way. It can stun it and kill it by itself. You don't need any other player, but the only issue with that is you need other players to kill the small fry and to protect you. You can defeat big shots and shoot floppers out of the sky, but will you be safe doing that if you don't have teammates supporting you? Maybe I should put it at the top at A tier actually. Let's do that, because I think it's got too many weaknesses to put it in S tier. I'll be fair. So we're going to talk about the mini Splatling now, and the mini Splatling is a very unique Splatling. Almost feels like a shooter, a semi-automatic shooter, with how fast it charges. Again, it does 35 damage, but it's probably the most ink efficient Splatling, and it's probably the Splatling that faces the least amount of punishment from chaos and overwhelming static spam, because you have a lot more freedom with it. Its charges are quick and its cycles of shots are quick, so you kind of feel like you're playing it like a semi-automatic shooter. One of the main issues that I had with the mini Splatling at the beginning of Splatoon 3 was that its ink efficiency was poor. I never understood why people were telling me it was good, because I was like, why, it always runs out of ink. And maybe the Splatoon devs heard me, because they buffed its ink tank not long into the game's lifespan. So now it feels a lot better to play with, because you're not constantly running out of ink. I felt like they treated the mini Splatling like every other Splatling and gave it this overwhelmingly harsh ink tank for some reason. But the truth is, with the mini, you don't want to stay still with it. It's kind of like the Bamboo of its class, in that it still is respectively a Splatling because you have to charge it, but its charges are so fast and you're so mobile with it. You should be more aggressive with it. You should be more upfront with it, and you shouldn't necessarily be a weapon that you want to stand back and think about important timings of shots. You want to spam your shots like shooters do. So the mini Splatling is solid, and again, it works with a lot of comps because of its ability to fulfill different roles. It's a decent slayer, it's a decent painter, it's got decent mobility, and you're able to sort of comfortably fit in most comps. It's just, wouldn't you just rather a shooter? Wouldn't you rather the splatter shot of the 52? Wouldn't you rather an end zap or a splash? I would, because then you don't have to charge. But I appreciate that compared to other Splatlings, it's got a lot of benefits. So for that reason, I will put it in A rank, and I will probably put it here. I think it's preference. I'm going to leave it there. Actually, I'm going to leave it here. Nautilus, I feel for some reason is neglected by the devs in Salmon Run, because I feel like I rarely ever see it in rotation. I feel like it's not liked by them. I feel like we see every other weapon way more often than the Nautilus for some reason. The Nautilus is incredibly fun to play, because the reasons why Splatlings suffer is because once you charge your shot with a Splatling, you want to make sure you use it, and if you don't use it, that's wasted time charging your shot. The Nautilus doesn't have that issue, because you can charge half your shot, go into squid form, come back out and carry on charging. The Naut has slightly less range than the Heavy, but it has more range than the Mini. It's also able to hold full and partial charges for 3.5 seconds. Can you tell I'm reading off a website here? I just needed to confirm a few things. It feels faster than a lot of other Splatlings, and like the ballpoint, I forgot to mention this about the ballpoint, it can recharge whilst firing, okay? The Nautilus is very, very adaptable. The problem with the Nautilus, though, I feel like, is that its ink efficiency is not great. But I think that's it, actually. I think that's the only problem with it, in that it's got quite a harsh ink tank because it's a Splatling. So you kind of have a hard time if you need to throw bombs and you've got a lot of Moors and missiles and rain on the field. Other than that, I think it's so solid. I think it's so fun. It has the same damage as all the other Splatlings at 35, but the fact that you can hold your charge, meaning that you've got more freedom than all other Splatlings, and you don't even lose that much accuracy when you jump as well, I think it's solid, and I think it really does deserve to go in. I actually think, no, you know what, I'm going to put it in S tier. I'm going to make the decision to do it. I'm going to put it in S tier, because I think it's more versatile than all the other Splatlings before it. I did it. Oh my god, guys. Don't hate me in the comments. I think it's great. I think it's great. It does everything. What does it struggle against? Just it has a few issues that it struggles with, but so does all of the other Splatlings struggle with. So GG's, it's a very good Splatling. It's not as good as a ballpoint, but it's still very good. Time to talk about the Splatanas. So until very recently there was only 2, and now we have a third one, the Decavitator. I'm gonna leave the Decavitator till last when talking about this class, because for the longest time it's been the Wiper and the Stamper, and the Stamper is genuinely one of the best weapons in Salmon Run, because when combined, so its projectile and its melee hitboxes, the way all Splatanas work is they have 2 ways of hitting and then it can combine, right? So the Stamper does 180 swing charge. It's projectile, so when you fling with it, it does 180. If you hit a melee at the same time, you do a combined total of 400. So it's 180 and 220 together to do 400. Do you know what that means, guys? You have heard me say this so much throughout this video and tier list. That means you can one-hit Cohocs. And for that reason alone, the Stamper is X tier. And I'm not even kidding. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but the ability to shred through lessers is absolutely insane. The Stamper also has an ability to hit objects behind it. So it doesn't just hit the Cohoc in front of you, it also does damage to the Cohoc behind it, okay? So it doesn't necessarily pierce, it just has a large hitbox that allows it to hit multiple things at once. It's also got insane range. It's also got a really good ink tank. It's also really fast. It doesn't struggle with any single boss, in my opinion. The only thing you will struggle with is if you don't crit, so if you don't hit your melees and you swing instead. That's the only time you'll suffer. And that, my friends, is a skill issue. I do it all the time. I just, you know, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you swing instead of charge. There is no reason for me to believe that this weapon is anything less than X tier, because when you've got a Stamper on your team, you can shred through absolutely everything, and oh my god, it's super fun. It's one of those weapons where I feel invincible playing. Paints really well, doesn't have any negatives in my opinion. I would probably put it as the best weapon in the game in Salmon Run, genuinely. I also think it goes with every single comp. If there is no one boss that it struggles against, there is no role that it cannot fulfill, and there's nothing it can't protect itself against. So the Wiper, the Splatana Wiper, is slightly different. It's not as powerful. It's swing, projectile and melee hitbox combined does 325, so you do 75 less damage than the Stamper. But the Wiper is slightly faster and has slightly better ink tank, meaning you could sort of move about a bit quicker. The thing is, I don't think the fact that it does slightly less damage means it's that much worse. I think because of its inability to do as much damage as 400, it is not as good as the Stamper, but I still think it is an S tier weapon. It takes slightly longer to kill things with the Wiper than the Stamper, but it has the same benefits in that you can run around maps and hit multiple different things with its sort of wide hitbox. It has slightly better ink efficiency as well. And again, the only reason I'm not putting it in X tier is because of the fact that it does 325 damage and not 400. I will probably put it... Again, I think this is preference about what you prefer to play, but I will probably put it here, in that I think it does a bit of everything really, really well, and there's not one thing that it really struggles against, but it just doesn't have that X tier where it does everything amazingly. The last weapon in the Splatana class is the Decavitator, which hasn't been out that long at the time of recording this video. It's July and it came out at the beginning of June. Okay, so it's been in the game for just under 2 months, so truthfully I haven't played with it that much, but what I will say, the times that I have played with it, it is a solid weapon. The only issues with it is that it's not as easy to use as the Stamper and as the Wiper. The hitbox of the Decavitator is slightly different compared to the other 2 Splatanas. It's like you fire from the hip rather than firing from the weapon itself. So your aim is slightly different. The way you position or hold your controller will be slightly different. Its ability to one cycle a steelhead is quite tricky as well. You can't do 2 charge slashes like you can with either the Stamper or the Wiper. You won't have enough time, but you can do flicks with it instead, which will kill it. So your fast charges will kill it, which isn't the same for the others. So there's benefits and negatives to the Decapitator. The Decapitator feels slower, and I think you get punished more for using your shots in an ineffective way. Its ink tank is also a bit less good than the Wiper and the Stamper, but, and I'm going to tell you but, the Decapitator's damage per shot is higher than the Stamper's. So its projectile is 200, the swing projectile. So when you get combined damage, that's 450 damage. That's more than the Tentabrella. It's more than the Dreadringer. It's more than the Squiffer. It's not more than the E-Liter. Do you see where I'm going with this? The Decapitator has the ability to really kill things, and kill things quickly. Cohawks, big shots, drizzlers, you can kill them substantially quicker with the Decapitator than most other weapons in the game. The issue, like I said, is its ink tank and its aim is slightly off. And I haven't played with it as much as I've played with the other two. And so I feel like I can't give it an opinion on it that is like 100% based in true understanding of the weapon. But for everything I've seen of this weapon, and for everything I know of this weapon, I do think it belongs in S tier. But for now, I'm going to put it at the bottom of S tier. Just for now. I'm going to put it above the Bloblobber for definite. But I actually think I'm going to put it above this as well, because I don't like the S-Blast. It's powerful, but it has some limitations that are not instinctively easy to overcome. So it's sort of the same issues that you have with the Hydra, the Dynamo, the S-Blast, the Tenta. Tricky weapons that are not quite easy to use, but if you do know how to use them, then the payoff is huge. The Decapitator, I feel like, falls into that category. I don't think it's bad at all, but I definitely need some more practice with it. But I do think it belongs in S tier. I think its ability to do 450 per shot is insane, and it can't be lower than S tier for that reason. Alright, I've zoomed it out a bit now. You can see it all a bit better. So we're going to go on to our last class of weapons, which are... oh my god, the Stringers. Bloody hell, I forgot that. The word just went from my head. Like the Splatanas, a new class of weapon for Splatoon 3. The Reflux. Reflux is insane. I'm just going to come out here and say this. When it first came out, it felt ineffective, especially compared to the Tri-Stringer. Yes, it was fast, and yes, it could paint, but its damage really held it back. Sometime during Splatoon 3's lifespan, they buffed its damage, and they buffed its fully charged, and they buffed its partial charge. I'm just going to double check that actually. The buffs the Reflux received in version 4.0 was that it increased damage dealt when fired without charging. So it went from 30 to 32, so your tap shots. But then it also increased the damage dealt at the first charge by approximately 40%, which means that went from 50 to 70. That was so huge. It's unbelievable what that did for the Reflux, because now, along with it being an insanely fast, mobile, ink-efficient weapon, it now has enough damage and the safety to protect itself. The Reflux, you really do not want to fully charge this weapon at all in Salmon Run. It's not like the Tri or the Wellstring. You just want to spam partials with it as much as you can. It's so effective at supporting all other players on your team, and with paint with sort of added damage or supporting lessers, it can comfortably deal with lessers, and the majority of bosses really don't pose an issue with it because of how good its ink tank is. The only issue I would say is steelheads, funnily enough. It's usually the way that I would mark a weapon down, but given that the Reflux doesn't suffer with anything else, I'm gonna say that it's not the worst thing in the world that the Reflux may suffer with steelheads. I don't even think it's suffers with steel heads. I think it's something that isn't intuitive when you first pick up the weapons. If you're able to get to the same height as the steel head, you can tap shot it and one cycle it. But if you can't and you have to charge, you might not always hit that, and it takes 2 charges to fully get it or kill it on 1 cycle. That's its only downside as far as I'm concerned, and for that reason I think it definitely belongs in S tier. I think I will put it up with the Wiper, the 52 and the Splatter Shot, because I feel like they fill similar roles, and if you have a Wiper and a Reflux, they'll kind of be doing the same thing. I think it's a great weapon. It's one of those weapons that really benefited just from a slight damage increase like the Sniper did, because everything else about the weapon is perfect, for Salmon Run especially. Like its mobility, its pain, its efficiency. Fantastic. You don't have to worry about that. Its fire rate is insane as well. It's just like ping, 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 ping. Oh my god, yeah. Reflux is goated. It fits with almost every single comp too. The Tri-Stringer. Tri-Stringer is one of the best weapons in the game, and until very recently was the best weapon in its class. I don't know how they've managed to outdo the Tri-Stringer, but they have, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The Tri-Stringer does between 100 and 100 per, what do they call them, explosive projectiles, right? So depending on how much you charge them. So if you fully charge the Tri-Stringer and hit all your projectiles on one target, it's 450 damage per shot. So that puts it equivalent with a Decavitator, the Tentabrella. Things like these explosive, powerful one-shot weapons. It's not quite as powerful as the E-liter, but it charges faster than the E-liter, okay? The other good thing about the Tri-Stringer is that it's also very good with its partial shots as well, meaning its taps and its half charges, you also get quite a lot of damage out of them, meaning that if you're stuck against a bunch of lessers, against a bunch of Cohocs, you can comfortably defeat them without feeling like you're stuck like some Splatlings and some Chargers do. For that reason, the Tri-Stringer, I would have put it in X tier before the Wellstring came out, but I think I'm going to put it at the top of S tier. The only reason I would pick an E-liter over a Tri-Stringer is if I want something to pierce. For everything else, they both are the same way, except the Tri-Stringer has better ink efficiency and can adapt to rolls a bit better. I find with the E-liter, if there's a bunch of stingers and flyfish on a map, you really will struggle, whereas with a Tri-Stringer, I find it sucks obviously, but you can go down and help your teammates a lot easier than you can with an E-liter. Tri-Stringer is just unbelievably goated as a weapon in Salmon Run, and I actually feel offended at myself for not putting it in X tier, but I'm going to put the Wellstring in X tier, and I'll explain why in a moment. Tri-Stringer doesn't suffer against enemies the way other sort of Chargers or Splatanas do, because you do kind of, if you think about stringers, you do kind of have to compare them to other weapons that have to charge their shots as well. You know, the Tri-Stringer is comparable to an E-liter, is comparable to a Hydra and so forth. Tri-Stringer is the best out of all of them because the downsides, the things that make these weapons historically quite weak or make them not adaptable to most roles, don't really affect the Tri-Stringer. The Wellstring is the Wellstring is insane. Again, when they released this weapon, which is about 2 months ago, by the way, it's the same with the Decavitator. It's only been in the game less than 2 months, so I haven't played with it as much as I want to. Yeah, I have played with the Wellstring more than I've played with the Decavitator. There's a video on my channel of a lossless 999 run, and the Wellstring was part of that. Wellstring carried me, by the way, guys. The thing with the Wellstring is that it's objectively the most powerful weapon in Salmon Run right now. It's disgusting. And I genuinely thought, again, that it was broken the same way they did with the Dreadrigger. Its partial charges are filthy. The way that it shreds big shots is, I'm sitting here going, when they're going to nerf it, when they're going to nerf it. The only issue with the Wellstring that can make it quite tricky to use is its fully charged status. So the Reflux and the Tri-Stringer have 3 points of fire. Okay, the Wellstring has 5. Okay, so it's quite difficult, especially when going for steelheads, to line up your shots to get all 5 of them to hit it where you want it. Other than that, it's fine. You don't even want to charge the Wellstring. What makes it insane is the Wellstring is technically classified as a heavyweight weapon. Can I just point this out? Think of other heavyweight weapons. Elita, Tent, Hydra, Explo. Think of their downsides, okay? They're all inefficient. They're all slow. They all really struggle in a lot of ways. Does the Wellstring suffer like that? No. It does not suffer at all. If you want to kill a steelhead, tap shot it. I promise you. You just have to get to the right height. The Wellstring does 120 times 5, right? So that's 600. If you get every one of its 5 things to hit one target, that's 600. But given how large the projectiles are, the sort of when you charge it, you won't necessarily hit all 5. It can take a little while to fully charge it as well. You'll see like 2 charging states. So the idea is that you don't fully charge it. You just tap shot away, because you've got 5 things, 5 points of fire for the Wellstring. I'm like losing the will to live now. I've been recording this for so long, sorry, but it's just, the Wellstring is broke, quite frankly. And the Wellstring is the reason why the Tri-Stringer isn't going into X tier. The Wellstring goes into X tier. Actually, hold on. Yeah, let's put it here. It's crazy. It's crazy. The Wellstring feels like a Grizzco weapon. Can I just point that out, by the way? It doesn't feel like a normal weapon. It feels like a Grizzco weapon. Ridiculous. I don't even know what else to say about the weapon. It paints as well. Bloody hell, it paints. How is it a heavyweight weapon? They need to nerf this thing, at least from a PvP perspective. This thing's bloody annoying in PvP. Let's talk about the Grizzco weapons. Right, so this is my tier list of regular weapons here. But I'm going to put the Grizzco weapons in because I feel like people will be like, why didn't you do that? So we are going to do that. And we're going to start off with a blaster. Funny. I think it's the worst Grizzco weapon. The blaster runs out of ink way more quickly than you think it should. So the blaster does 50 direct and 35 indirect. So objectively, compared to other blasters, it's extremely weak. But its fire rate is insane. It's absolutely insane. And it just fires continuously. The problem with the Grizzco blaster is that it does run out of ink quicker than, say, the Grizzco Brella, which is it's comparable to. So if I had to pick a blaster or a Brella, I would pick a Brella more often than not over the Grizzco blaster, for the fact that the Brella is much better at being supportive. So the Grizzco blaster, in my opinion, isn't that great for a Grizzco weapon, quite frankly. And there's a lot of other weapons that I would pick over it, but because it's a Grizzco weapon, it will go in S tier. It will just go at the bottom of S tier. The same with the Grizzco Brella. The Grizzco Brella does 80 per direct, so it's slightly better than the blaster, but its sort of minimum damage fall off the pellets that can come off can do 15. So if you miss targets, you'll get like scattered shots. It paints better than the Grizzco blaster in my opinion, and its fire rate is crazy, right? The only issue is it doesn't have a canopy, which in retrospect is a very strange decision, I think. Doesn't feel like a Brella, just feels like a shotgun on steroids, I guess. Grizzco Charger. I would say the Grizzco Charger is my favourite Grizzco weapon to use. The reason for that is because the weapons we're going to talk about next can be tricky if they can't be fully utilised. The Dualies and the Roller are very limited in the way they can attack enemies. The Slosher and the Bow are so ink hungry it can be detrimental, and the Stamper is similar to the Roller and the Dualies in that it's very niche in a lot of ways, and it can be really tricky to get the hang of it. The Stamper specifically was the Grizzco weapon that took me the longest to get. It's very, very different, and it was honestly quite shocking when they released it, how different it was. The Charger, on the other hand, feels like a beefed up, roided up bamboo that pierces and has insane range. And you can't tap shot with the Grizzco Charger because it tap shots to charge, okay? Pierces, and it can shoot everything from far away. It does 200 damage, always. Goes in S rank for me. Goes in S rank without a question. Because I feel like, again, I feel like something that doesn't necessarily happen with the other Grizzco weapons from now on is that I feel like the Charger can fit into most comps. Do I prefer it over the Squiffer? The Grizzco Charger has about 5 or 6 shots per tank. And technically, the Squiffer does more damage, just takes slightly longer to pierce. Up to you, really, but it belongs in X tier. The Grizzco Dualies are interesting, let's say that. They're probably one of the shortest range weapons in the game. So the Grizzco Dualies are different to every other Dualies in that they can dodge roll 9 times. Very fast, and they have quite a generous ink tank to go with it as well. The dodge rolls do not consume that much ink, so you really feel like you can dodge roll continuously. But the other interesting thing about the dodge rolling with the Grizzco Dualies is that the dodge rolling causes damage, right? So anything caught within a certain radius of the explosive dodge roll takes 125 damage. So that kills Small Fry and it kills Chum, but it also stuns enemies, and you can also use it to kill things like fish sticks. You just dodge roll off the top of a fish stick. If you don't get the up close damage, it can then deal with damage between like 40 and 125, its dodge roll. So it has like a large splash radius where it can deal minimum 40. The problem with the Grizzco Dualies comes from its crazy range, and I mean it's crazy tiny, really small range. It cannot shoot anything further than like spitting distance. I would even argue that spitting distance is longer than what the Grizzco Dualies can hit. So it's got its downsides there. So for bosses like Steelheads, for bosses that have any height or require any form of traversing, like fish sticks for example, you will struggle to get up there. It's not like you can't do it. You can do it. It just might take you longer. You're not the best person for the job. The other interesting thing about the Grizzco Dualies is that they can kill fly fish by dodge rolling into the middle of it. So again, the fact that it can kill a fly fish with its weapon without a bomb, you have to consider that in the same scope as the Explo. It's very beneficial to a team comp. Its ink efficiency is very good. Its damage is not so bad. 30 damage per shot. So it's like kind of, it's on the weaker side for the Dualies, but the main way that you want to use the Grizzco Dualies is dodge rolling, explosive damage. They paint so well. Like if you're using the Grizzco Dualies and there's a bunch of floppers on the field, just dodge roll over them. It's 1 or 2 and it's painted. It can be a lifesaver for your teammates with non-painty slow weapons. So I believe it can go in S tier. And I'll put it at the top of S tier because I don't think it belongs in X tier because I think its range really does hinder it and it's not that powerful if in comparison to others. I still think it's solid though. It's a really fun weapon. Grizzco Roller, holy hell, it's the most fun, the most exciting Grizzco weapon, in my opinion. While this weapon is fun, it's very strange and it's very unique. Same with the Dualies and same with the Stamper, and that you kind of have to really know how to utilize this weapon to get the most out of it. The thing that it's really good at is rolling. So anything that interferes with its roll is detrimental to how good it will be. So think steel eels, think scrappers, think anything that interferes with its roll. The good news is that its roll does 400 damage, which is the same as the dynamo. So you can roll over all lessers and stun things quite easily. It's also got insane speed once you hit maximum rolling speed. And I mean insane to the point that you zoom across maps, that sometimes you go too fast for the game to register what you're doing. But this is also really beneficial in clearing up lessers. And its main thing that it is really good at is clearing up lessers and turfing for teammates. And during the rotation that the Grizzco Roller was released, during the big run in June, I can't tell you how many high scores I got when we had a Grizzco Roller on our team, because lessers just do not exist. If you don't do anything else other than clean up lessers with a Grizzco Roller, you're still doing an amazing job that 95% of the other weapons in the game can't do. For that reason alone, it deserves to go in X tier. It also does horizontal and vertical flick damage. Its horizontal flicks are very short range and barely do anything. They do 150. So the idea is that you'd only ever use that when wanting to go into rolling form. The downside of the roller is that it does have an insanely powerful vertical flick. It is 600 damage, by the way, but it takes longer than a dynamo takes. And I mean, it takes really, really long. So you want to avoid vertical flicking for things that don't need 600 damage, for things that you can mow down. The only thing you will vertical flick for, much the same as the Dynamo, is a steelhead. That's it. The fact that you can one-shot steelheads with this weapon, again, makes it even better. X tier. Without a doubt. You just run into a few complications if the spawns are fly fish, scrappers, and eels. Then you won't have a great time with the Grizzco roller, but you can still maximise taking care of lessers. The Grizzco Slosher, this is an interesting weapon. In Splatoon 2, I would argue it was actually the best Grizzco weapon in the game, even more so than the Charger, because it was insanely powerful, and it still is insanely powerful. But then we've got this sort of power creep thing that we're having with Splatoon 3, where the newer Grizzco weapons that are being released are much more powerful. And I have a feeling if the Grizzco Slosher was released now with Splatoon 3, it would be more powerful. It does 360 per direct, so the Grizzco Slosher pierces armor. The Grizzco Slosher can kill steelheads without having to wait for it to execute its attack. Okay, so the steelhead, its armor has 500 HP. Certain weapons can bypass that. So Grizzco Slosher is one of them. So 2 sloshes to the body of the steelhead gets rid of steelheads without you needing to aim at the bomb. If you aim at the bomb, it's one shot when it activates. The point is the slosher can pierce through all armor. It's the same with scrappers, it's the same with eels, it's the same with drizzlers. You don't have that limitation of waiting for enemies to attack when you're using the slosher. The problem is it's slow, and the problem is it's very punishing on your ink tank. You get 4 swings and that's it. If you throw a bomb, you are fucked. You cannot do anything else with this weapon. So you do not want to throw bombs. The good thing is though, you shouldn't be throwing bombs because you can one-shot fly fish if you hit it in the center. So for me personally, the Slosher is one of my favorites because it's always been good. But I can understand that if you're new to Splatoon 3 and you never played Splatoon 2, you're probably looking at the Slosher and going, why is it good when compared to the roller, the Dualies, the bow, and the stamper? And I get that, I respect that. But still, I think it belongs in X tier because of its ability to kill mudmouths, its ability to kill grillers. It pierces through everything. There's absolutely no way you won't see the benefits of this weapon. The problem is you just have to learn how to pace your shots and not throw bombs. Okay? The more I look at this, I'm like, should these be lower than these? I think we'll have to move them because they're overpowered Grizzco weapons. But if you ignore Grizzco weapons, then you can see which weapons were the best in the game prior to me including Grizzco weapons. The Grizzco Stamper, arguably probably the hardest weapon to use, I think. When you charge with the Stamper, it takes a while to charge. I think it takes over a second. But when you charge with the Stamper and when you put all that attack into one enemy, you deal 1200 damage. There is not much else in the game that can deal 1200 damage with one shot or close to it. The Sniper Rifle can, the E-liter's not far behind you. If you think about damage per second and things, there are some things that can deal 1200 damage in the time it takes for the Stamper to charge up 1200 damage. But the Stamper also pierces armor. So for everything I've just said about the Grizzco Slosher, the Splatana can do that as well. So you can kill steelheads before they attack with one charge. You can kill grillers with one hit without even having to stun them. Like, the power on this Grizzco weapon is insane, and the fact that it has no range doesn't even bother me anymore. Now that I've gotten used to the weapon, the only thing you will suffer with is fish sticks. Everything else you will have no problems dealing with. Every other obstacle you can overcome because you can pierce through its armor, or you can do its tap shots, its swing shots, which deal, by the way, 200 damage, which means you can two-shot Cohocs very quickly. The Stamper is so good on Tornado because you can just leave the Grizzco Stamper to deal with lessers. If you don't have the ability to charge the Grizzco Stamper, then just doing regular slashes with it is enough damage than the majority of the weapons. It's crazy how good the Grizzco Stamper is. Unfortunately, it's one of those weapons you kind of have to practice with before you're able to really see the benefits of, which can be quite tricky, and if you don't have a position to charge, then you think, oh, this weapon's not good because I'm not charging it. But but the weapon works without charging it. Honestly, there's been games where I've never charged it once and just run around slashing everything. Still works. The only thing you'd have an issue with then is still heads, but you just find a safe space and charge your weapon and kill it. Can protect itself, can do everything. Can camp big shot cannons and be fine. Don't do that, please don't. If you do that, I'm not taking any responsibility for it. Final weapon. Well done if you've made it this far. Can I just say thank you if you've made it this far? I appreciate it. If you liked this video and would like to see me ramble more about other things in Splatoon, or Salmon Run really I should say, please let me know. I'm open to doing more tier lists, maybe about the maps or the specials, and I'm open to doing longer form videos where I just discuss things, you know. So if this does interest you, because I know there are people that like to just listen to things for 3 or 4 hours, and if this does interest you, then let me know. I'm open to doing it, but if nobody comments and nobody watches this, then I get the hint and I won't do it again. I'll go back to doing my 5-minute videos for the TikTok generation. Anyway, let's talk about the Grizz stringer. You know, I was talking about the well string and saying it felt like a Grizz weapon. It's because it actually doesn't feel any... how do I say this? It does, in a sense that the Grizz stringer has 9 instead of 5, right? The well string has 5 things that it can shoot from. The Grizz stringer has 9, okay? So the total damage, if you get all 9 of them on one object, is 1350. Per shot, the Grizz stringer is the strongest weapon in the game. Let me tell you this now, if you have the Grizz stringer on any of the king waves, you need to be firing all 9 shots fully charged into your king. Do not do anything else, okay? The problem with the Grizz stringer is that it's very ink inefficient because it's a Grizz weapon, and you kind of have to offset it. And realistically, what are you going to put 9 targets into? Most enemies in Salmon Run are not big enough for 9 things to go into, so you'll have wasted shots. The good thing then is, like the other stringers, the Grizz stringer, its partial charges are amazing too. Depending on whether you tap shot or whether you charge to the first half circle, you can still slay so well with the Grizz stringer. Only slightly more damage than the well string. May I just point that out? That's why the well string feels so broken, because if you were to compare it side by side to the Grizz stringer, I think the Grizz stringer is only slightly more powerful. If I ever do a video on the well string in the future, I will talk about that. Anyway, the Grizz stringer is insanely powerful and can shred everything in one shot. Every single boss. The highest HP of any singular boss is 1200, so that's your big shot, your Moors, and your flipper floppers when they haven't broken on the ground. They all have 1200 HP. Obviously Moors are one shot with a bomb, and obviously floppers lose most of their health when they crash into painted ground. The Grizz stringer can one shot all of them with a fully charged all 9 points hitting them. How do you compare that to any other weapon? Just, you know, don't throw bombs. Again, it's quite straightforward. You will struggle with fly fish, particularly because of your inability to throw bombs, and you can one-shot stingers if you line up all 9 of the targets all fine. So stingers aren't really an issue, and fish sticks aren't really an issue too, because you can get up there really quickly and tap shot them all. It's just fly fish that are the biggest issue for the stringer. So, you know, use a special or go for a bomb. I think I'll put it above the Stamper because of its ability to do well in king waves. That's why. But I honestly think a lot of this is opinion. So if you think about all the weapons that I've put in X tier, I think it's opinion about whether you would prefer a Sploosh over a Dapples, or a Ballpoint over a Squiffer, or a Dreadringer over a Wellstring, right? I think it's opinion, and I think all of the weapons in X tier, maybe apart from the Grizz ones at the beginning, they're all sort of ordered in a way where it's like they're all just as good as each other, and they all have slightly different niches that make them better for one reason or another than the weapon next to it. But you know, they all work excellent, and it's the same for all the other ranks, S, A, B, and C. Like, I don't necessarily think they're ordered strictly. Some of them are. Like, I'd prefer a Hydra to a Gluga, and I'd prefer a Flingser to a Big Swig, for sure. For the most part, I wouldn't bog down too seriously in the way that they're ordered within their respective tiers, please. I just want to put that out there, because I think it's just opinion at that point. Apart from F tier, they're all just as bad as each other, I think. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, let me know. Like I said, if you think you would like to see more of this type of content, let me know, and I might consider it, might not. I've spoken at my computer for 3 hours now, and I'm not sure I want to do this again anytime soon. Yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys soon.